Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles, and welcome to Family Office TV. Black Swan portfolios, Nvidia AI, GLP-1, not related to Black Swan, just different topics. I'm not even finished yet. We have a subtitle: The Best Portfolio in the Event of War, and much, much more. I'm glad you're joining me today live as we have one of my favorite guests, not just in macro and investing, Adam Robinson. Adam has been a frequent guest, as many of you know, on my little old podcast, and also someone you might have heard of who has a pretty popular podcast, Tim Ferriss. Adam is an advisor and confidant to among the world's largest single family offices and hedge funds. And of course, I have to bring this up because he'll get a couple of questions. My son is wanting me to know. Adam is also a U.S. Chess Federation Life Master, so we'll weave in a couple of chess questions here or there. Adam, it's been too long, about 7 or 8 months. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. I'm delighted to be here with you, as I always am. I know that you bring a special erudition to your questions and scholarship, and a certain je ne sais quoi
I love it, Adam, and I appreciate you, and thanks so much for bringing all that up. I really enjoy my long-form, rather deep dive and sometimes quirky interviews in what I always say is a boring vanilla world of macro and family offices, so hopefully I change that dynamic somewhat. And on that note, we have a lot to cover. Why don't we get right to it?
Go for it.
Adam, we kind of covered this a little bit in the last podcast, early summer of 2023, but the world is ever changing so much more. How do we think through the unthinkable?
Well, boy, that's an open-ended question. So, one of my favorite quotes on intelligence by John Holt, he said, "Intelligence is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do." And so that's really the world we're in right now. It requires a special kind of intelligence. And, when I was a teenager back at Wharton, the idea that interest rates could be negative, I would have said, "Oh, that's impossible. There's no way that could ever happen." Or the settlement price of crude oil could go negative, as it did, was it April 11th, 2020? If the idea that a war would be brewing in Europe, and so we're in a surreal world now, and the old things people take for granted, they shouldn't. And what do I mean by that? So there are things that we just assume that if I'm hungry, I can go out to a restaurant. No problem. Or I'm in New York City. I call DoorDash, get them to deliver food to me. And I've got a refrigerator that'll keep whatever food I have here cold. But those are very shaky assumptions. I'm in New York, and a few weeks ago, there was an earthquake in New York City. Now, that for a moment, I was deeply worried because I had already conjured in my mind a sequence of worst case scenario eventualities. The first is that shock we got was the foreshock, not the main event, and that a bigger earthquake would follow. By the way, that's still in the offing, right? That in geological terms, we're a millisecond away from a few weeks ago. And then I was worried about, by the way, I don't know if you know this, they immediately shut down the airports and the tunnels and bridges leading into and out of Manhattan. So people outside of Manhattan won't have a sense of how, if a disaster happens in Manhattan, you won't be able to get off the island. And I lived 5 blocks from the World Trade Center when that went down. 5 blocks. If it had fallen like a domino, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And they immediately shut down the entire neighborhood. We were forced evacuated. So when that earthquake hit here, I was concerned that a bigger quake was about to follow. And then notice what happens, Angelo. They'd lock down the bridges and the airports and the tunnels. You can't get off the island. And then what happens when the power grid goes down? Now you're stuck on an island, no electricity, no coming in or out. And so that was a very real possibility. And so why am I bringing that up? Is that when family members have to consider scenarios that would have been unthinkable, as you said, right? Who'd have thought that you could be trapped on this island with no electricity and you can't get off? You can't drive off, the bridges are shut, the tunnels are shut, the airports are closed down. And the real, was that movie, 40 years ago, Escape from New York and Escape from LA with Kurt Russell? And that was a very real scenario here. And so, that's Adam on an individual level. But as a family member, you've got to think portfolios with global locations. I have a friend, I'm not going to name him, but he has residences in New York, London, Hong Kong, Lugano. Oh, I better not mention this other one because it might give him away. Upstate New York, British Vancouver, and a couple of other places, because he's not sure when things go crazy where he ought to be. And so that's the world we're in right now, right? And so it's good to do scenario planning. The strong recommendation. You may recall, Angelo, it's a little before your time, but in the 70s there was an oil embargo.
Oh, it's not before my time. I'm pretty old, Adam.
Well, nonetheless. This was a great shock to the world. Only one oil company, Dutch Shell, had made money that year because they had run through that scenario like a couple years earlier, and they just pulled the notebook off the shelf and they opened it up, and they knew exactly what to do during an oil embargo. So. And again, John F. Kennedy said the time to fix a roof is not when it starts to rain. And you have to run through these things. And I know this is a theme that you've thought much about, Angelo, and have advised some of your clients, family offices and families, on disasters. This is very real, the world we're in right now. And the thing is, there won't be a lot of warning. It won't be a gradual, we better start to think about that. You actually have to start to plan that right now. You have to have those plans so that when it happens, you're ready. Eisenhower said, in battle, the plans are useless, but the act of planning is indispensable. So you have to plan. And not just for your investing portfolios, but the same kind of thinking about how are we as a family going to navigate this world. It's the same kind of thinking you do in investing.
100%. And I know some of the audience that follows us in our interviews, didn't you guys cover this a year ago? We did. One, new people need to hear it. You need to be reminded of it. And there's different nuances now as we have new information that came in. You are correct. One of my master classes is sovereign risk and disaster preparedness. And I'm going to be honest with you, Adam, 99.999% in my work in that, honestly, is brilliant and great. They don't give a shit. It's just whatever. I'm non-bloodline. I'm a family member. I'm a non-family member running the family office. This is a waste of my time. I don't know what I don't know. I don't want to know. It's not applicable. It's not going to happen. Let me just focus on my day-to-day. Now, I just threw most family offices under the bus, but this is a reality. How do we get past thinking day to day and think more long term when we may not be financially rewarded to do so for something that has a beyond insignificant chance of happening, but that insignificance went from 0.1% to maybe 5%?
So family offices have to be aware of the people who advise them. And I say this with great respect.
As to
Yes. Well, but so a study was done at the University of Texas, well, about 20 years ago, and they gave two groups of people an identical set of questions. The two groups were doctors, meaning surgeons operating and anesthesiologists, right? So doctors and anesthesiologists in surgical rooms, and pilots. And they give them an identical series of questions. And punchline coming up in a few seconds. And these 20 questions were identical, except for doing surgery, they would say, in the operating room, and referring to the pilot, same question, but it would be the cockpit, right? Same kind of thing. And on 18 of the 20 questions, so I was interested in the delta. Like, is there any question that they differed a lot about? And there were two that they diverged greatly on. One of them was, oh wait, hold on a sec. I got my book right here. I just look it up. Doggone it. I can do it pretty much from memory. Hold on. During a procedure, like operation, or when you're flying a plane, do you want to hear from junior members of the staff? In other words, co-pilots or other people in the operating room? And 60-something% of doctors said, no, I don't want to hear from them. 97% of the pilots said, yes, I do want to hear from them. Because here's the difference. If a pilot messes up, he's going to go down with the plane. He very definitely, I'm messing up, yes, please tell me. Whereas a doctor, most of them said, no, don't bother me. Don't bother me. And because they don't go down with the patient, not at all. Of course, they want the patient to survive and do well. But they're not going down with the plane the way a pilot would. So same thing if we pivot now to people who advise you. Are they going down with their advice? And or not? And if they're not, it's very easy for them to be kind of casual. Oh, don't worry about that. That's a 4 or 5 standard deviation outlier. Don't worry about that. And those are exactly the things you have to worry about. And I'm not saying worry about them, but just plan for and just give some thought to, if that happens, what are you going to do? So, for example, when the earthquake hit here, I called a lot of people and said, you better have a way to communicate if cell reception goes down. Imagine the concatenation of events. There's an earthquake in New York, power gets knocked out, including cell phone towers, and you're locked on the island. Now there's no way to get in touch with anybody. There's no Uber to call, right? Police are probably preventing traffic at this point. You can't get around. There's no subway. There's no electricity. Good luck communicating and coordinating in that scenario. And, I think, Angelo, because I know this is such a big, you care so much about the families you advise, to do it just kind of for fun. Let's just play through some scenarios. Of course, they'll never happen, but it's just, what would we do? And they should work through those. So
we have a mutual friend, EM, who is really, really good at thinking through and having an action plan for those scenarios to really simplify it.
Right. There's a few people better in the world than Ian Burningham. Yeah.
What would have a small likelihood of happening? But if it does, the consequences are significant. I could go in a store, not that I really eat cereal, but I could randomly pick a box of cereal. I don't need to give it a lot of thought. If I don't like it, I wasted $7. That is life. But if the consequences are dire to my family, my legacy, or my capital, my freedoms, then you absolutely have to think through what could be a disaster. Again, listen to some of my past interviews with Adam. We dive even deeper. And in that scenario that you described in New York, without trying to scare people, you give that scenario, I would say, a day and a half to 2 days, and you begin to have chaos. You
Wait a
that
second. Oh no, it's way before that. So
no water, no food are possibilities. Good luck getting in and out of New York.
So I was, it was July, a July summer night, and in New York, and it was twilight, but it was cloudy, and I'm talking about an event that, that's never going to happen. It was cloudy, and I was on the East River near the UN, sitting in a little park, looking out over Queens and Brooklyn, and just musing on life. And again, it's about 9 o'clock. The lights in the park went out. There's a little small dog walking park right next to the UN. I thought, okay, I guess closing time. So I walked out of the park towards First Avenue, and I was looking around going, wow, it's very odd, very, very dark. I guess a street light went out. And then I got to First Avenue. Remember, cars are driving by, Angelo, cars driving by. So I was a little misled, but I looked up and there wasn't a light in any of the buildings, not a one. And then I ran back down the hill to look out over all of Brooklyn and Queens. Think like 20 miles, right? Of one of the most densely populated cities in the world, not a single light on. It was a blackout. So I'm 22 years old, Angelo, and my very first thought was, there's going to be a crime wave. That was my first thought. And I wasn't the worldly wise bon vivant, now. I was clueless. But my first thought was, there's going to be a crime wave. And 2 days later, when they restored electricity, that's exactly what happened. An immediate crime wave. Immediate. So it's not a day or two or three. It's immediate. And especially now, if it's an earthquake that's inducing the blackout. And remember, the police are overwhelmed, the fire department overwhelmed. We all know, having studied history and certainly if you study the economics and stuff, there was a run on banks, right? During the Depression, run on banks. So why was that? I'm about to establish a concept here for your audience. Is that banks have fractional reserves. They're not required to, right? Of the deposits they have, they only have to have like 4 or 5%. And the rest they can lend out. Because they know on any given day, it's unlikely that like 1% of people are going to go, give me my money back. So 4% is a pretty good, multi-standard deviation, buffer around that. But when people start to panic, no, it goes from, it doesn't gradually go up. Because that can't happen and everyone panics at the same time, what can't happen is certain to happen. And so now imagine that's true not just for banks, it's true for police and fire departments that would be overwhelmed in a second. Angelo, I did an estimate once. Often on Sunday mornings, I set myself a question and I go research it. And so the question I set myself, so about 5 or 6 years ago was, how many police are there in New York per block? And I estimated back of the envelope that there's 1 cop for every 2 blocks. Now, a squad car usually has two cops. That means one car for every 4 New York City blocks. Good luck if there's problems that come up. There's no way. And so the idea of fractional reserve, we only have, well, we don't need a lot of police because not everything's going to happen at once. Well, sometimes it does happen. And like in that 1977, that blackout. There was another blackout about, what's that?
I remember that. And this reminds me of gold, Bitcoin, and Twinkies. There is an other fourth one that begins with a G, but that gets people a little riled up. So I'm not going to mention that one. And just try going in, forget a crisis, try going into the average bank. And I know this is going to sound very family office-ish. Try taking out a couple of $1 million. Do you think it's easy? It's your money. Do you think it's easy to get even $1 million? You don't think that it's going to be complex and they're going to argue with you that it's going to take days, if not longer, and want to know why? It's your money and you still have to answer for the why.
Well, so again, the thing is that I think it was Shakespeare, something about problems not coming singly. Oh no, when these things start, they will set in motion a series of other crises. One crisis begets a lot of others. And by the way, in a crisis, you can count on everyone to be stupid and not responding, not thinking clearly. So which compounds and leads to other crises. It's so. By the way, I'm not a doom and gloomer. I'm just that you need to be prudent about these things. Oh, you know what? You were talking before, and I wanted to bring up Boeing. So Boeing, as everyone knows, has all these problems. They had that crash a few years ago, the two fatalities, and then it came to light. The problems on that one model jet. But I realized, that doesn't happen alone. In other words, the assembly line for Boeing that produced that one model that was really dangerous would have produced other planes or, plane parts that were not going to do well. And why am I saying this? Because I wanted to make a point about people who have skin in the game and those who don't. So this is one of the scandals, and Boeing is a great company, great history, and yet, I don't know if you know this, Angelo, they have emails of engineers who worked on those planes, the planes that had fatalities, and they were joking about, I would never ride that plane. The engineers who built the plane were joking in emails, I would never ride the plane. A few said this, which was an interesting distinction. They said, I would ride it, but I would never let my family ride it. Right? Like, okay, I'll run that risk, but there's no way I'd let my wife and kids run that risk. Right? So your advisors, unless they have some kind of skin in the game, they won't be thinking with the kind of clarity and urgency that you're going to need, and an alignment of risks.
And arguably, rightfully so, in real calamity, they may have their own family to worry about. By the way, this is why I always tell principals, by the way, a little bit of an Angeloism. Mediocre family offices want to be left alone. Good family offices want to be mentored. The 3% that are great, and that's sadly all it is, they want to be told the truth. You need to deal with the principal where you can, and you need to be honest, blunt, and direct. And the reality is the buck does stop with them. If the family office is mediocre, it's your fault. You're the decision maker. You're the bloodline. It's your family. You're allowing mediocrity. You're not demanding greatness. And that's on you. I'm not even blaming the SFO executive too much, a little bit. But again, that's just me.
So there's a question that I've shared here. I think I shared it with Shane Parrish in my podcast with him and Tim Ferriss, which is this. what would you need to see to tell you that you were wrong? Say about an investment or about anything. So if someone comes along and says you should invest in impressionist painters because they went up 10% last year, blah blah blah. The question always to pose to them is, what would you need to see to tell you that you were wrong and that I should be selling all my impressionists instead of buying them, or farmland or whatever? And so when you turn to, I'm now addressing the family members, when you turn to one of your advisors and you say, do you think earthquake poses a risk to my family or whatever, some eventuality? And they'll say something like this: oh, no, not at all. Very, very small percentage chance. Then the question to hit that person with is, what would happen if you were wrong about that? and then, because people, it's not just confirmation bias, but they have all kinds of reasons to support why they're right, but they're not looking for, what would I need to see to tell me, uh-oh, I was wrong. So,
Adam, I say the exact same thing, and I'm going to reverse that on you a little bit. I like to bust your chops once in a while. We're going to get more to this a little bit later. Adam, what would cause you to change your mind about Bitcoin?
Well, wait. You haven't asked me about my mind on Bitcoin, so regarding what? So first you have to say, Adam, what's your view on Bitcoin, and then
we've done that before. You mentioned someone you wouldn't mention, said there's a fatal flaw.
Well, okay, so wait. Okay.
You is if I thought I knew what that fatal flaw was, and it's been solved for.
So it was that the cost of energy is so one of the constraints on Bitcoin production is the energy it takes to do the calculations. And there's my source, who's impeccable, and the plus ultra. Like there's no one knows more about this than this guy would. Says there's a flaw in that the energy costs are actually lower, and if that were known, the cost would drop on Bitcoin. But leaving that aside, Bitcoin is a as I'm going to use air quotes, as an investment is pretty much akin to gambling. And you know, I've heard it said since the inception of Bitcoin. What? It's been over a decade now, right? Since it first came along, and I've yet
now
to
15 years.
I'm sorry, what?
It's now 15 years.
There you go. There you go. More than a decade. And so there hasn't been a compelling use case for it yet. Like spreadsheets, when they came along, kaboom, personal computers took off. Right? It was actually, people forget, it was the spreadsheet that led to the PC revolution. Before that, it was just Apple things were just little toys for kids. And anyway, so there's the blockchain technology. I get it, and I want to distinguish between the coins and the blockchain technologies. I'm agnostic. I'm open to that they will develop applications, and yet it's been 15 years. You would think by now, like there'd be a good by the way, I mean an application that everyday use, right? And you know, it is said that of Bitcoin and the other coins that you know, the U.S. government is printing a lot of money. The U.S. dollar is going to be worthless, and so it's a safeguard against a collapse in the fiat currency. I want to tell you, if it gets.
Oops, I think we're getting Adam back, everyone.
Oh, I didn't leave.
Well, we lost you for like 10 seconds. It wasn't so bad.
Oh, well, I don't know what.
I think you were basically saying if the U.S. currency collapses, fiat currency.
So if that happens, so you've got 2% of your wealth tied up in Bitcoin, like, okay, it's a little hedge for that, black swan event. Well, if that happens, then all bets are off. Then we got problems that'll spill over into the social realm, into geopolitics. There's so many other things that it's not just the dollar goes down. Oh boy, my Bitcoin went to $1 million per coin, right? There'd be so many other problems in that case. So I'm agnostic on the technologies that they might develop applications, but I'm not seeing it.
What technology is the dollar as currency? It's also not backed by anything. And the fact that it's got the SEC stamp of approval, BlackRock, Vanguard, all these companies coming in now with spot ETFs, when is going to be the point when this is not tulips?
Oh, wait. I didn't say... I didn't say it was tulips. I'm saying I don't understand the investment case for it. I just don't. I don't.
Liquid gold?
I'm sorry?
Liquid gold?
Well, funny you should mention gold. Throughout history, I can look back 5,000, 6,000 years, and gold has always been prized, right? And I'm not saying that is a gold bug. I'm not. But gold, I know over time is... So it's interesting that you use the phrase liquid gold, because you're exactly right. Gold is proven historically over millennia. When all else fails, good to own a few gold bars. So now it's got problems, right? It has problems in that it can't be transported too easily, right? Of course, there are problems. But to say that Bitcoin is liquid gold, remember that there are a lot of contingencies on that. I'm not opining. I'm just saying these are the questions. One of the things about Bitcoin that is lauded as a virtue is that it's transparent and there's no interference with anything. Oh, well. Here's a question for anyone who thinks that. Do you think any government in the world is going to allow their ability to tax you to just go away? I don't think so. And to me, Bitcoin is arguably a means of monitoring people. I'm saying that's as a question.
Well, that goes very deeply into SHA 256, the CIA near 30 years ago, technically was, and I asked this to Michael Saylor and others, is the US government or an agency involved in somewhat of either a backdoor or the creation, even of quasi-indirect, of Bitcoin and crypto? And is it to get us comfortable with digital wallets, government-backed central bank digital currencies? Now, there's also something the Bitcoin maximalists would get very mad I didn't bring up. You did lump Bitcoin into other crypto. They're going to talk about escape velocity, proof of work, but we don't need to get into the technical, granular details. I think my audience thinks I probably talk about it, although I really haven't too much in the last year, a little too much. And me and Adam like this little friendly disagreement. It makes the podcast a little more exciting. It's okay.
Sorry, what makes you think it's friendly?
Ooh.
I'm just teasing.
I know. We're really going at it now.
I'm so teasing you. And it would take a friend to say something like that. Yeah, I do have these concerns about Bitcoin. And, here's, again, a thought experiment. If everything really went to hell, what would people rush to? I don't think everyone, I'm looking out my window. I don't think the man and woman on the street there is going to go, oh, I got to get into Bitcoin right now. And so there's that, and Bitcoin,
Yeah, but you have to answer that question, Adam. What are they going to rush into?
Well, I'll tell you what they have for millennia: gold. right?
How
Gold,
much can you
diamonds.
carry?
I'm sorry. Well,
How much
diamonds.
can you carry?
Wait. I don't want to really, when things get that bad, then all bets are off. Then you're dealing with,
Twinkies, ammunition, and water.
yeah, there you go. Right. It's at that point, it's, yeah, then it's very Mad Max, right? It's really, by the time, if Bitcoin were to get to 1 million, oh, you got so many other problems to deal with.
Okay, you're maybe not incorrect. Could I state if gold gets to 15,000, we also have a problem?
So here's the thing, Angelo. When I was a teenager at Wharton, all of 17, I remember when they were saying that about gold. Gold is going to get to 50,000. They were saying that when I was a teenager, which was a few years ago. And, one of the things they say about, people forget is the printing of the dollar, printing money, it's a race to the bottom. So the dollar is relative to other currencies. And every government in the world is printing money. And so, led by Japan, but they're all printing money, which is why even though the US government has printed a lot of money, relative to all the other currencies, the US dollar is actually quite strong right now.
Absolutely, yes. I have a question on that. I only got about 49 more questions left. It's a hot take, and it's probably meant to get a little bit of gasp and you're crazy. We have a massive deficit in this country. There's no way that I could spin that's good. It's a problem. But is it a little or more than a little overblown? As long as we're the world's reserve currency, we are the king. Now, BRICS Plus are trying to take it down. Maybe they partially backed by commodities. I don't see that happening anytime in the near term, but they're making a little impact. Am I broadly correct? The deficit is not a positive, but as long as we are the world's reserve currency, maybe we're overblowing it a little bit.
Well, see, here's the thing, Angelo. One of the causes of the American Revolution was that, that rallying cry, no taxation without representation. And so the deficit, suppose the US had no foreign holders or anything else of our debt, is when the government prints money and spends it this year, we're borrowing it from future generations. 2, 3, 4 generations are going to be left paying off the largesse of whatever political party is in the Oval Office or Congress. Like, yes, let's increase spending. So when you hear let's give money to X, really what that's saying is let's put our grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren into debt to do that, because that's actually what we're doing. Right, we're borrowing from the future, and so leaving aside reserve currency and all that, still we have way too much debt. Do you know, Angelo? The average debt per human being on the planet is roughly $50,000 per human being. Now that means a family of 8 in a developing nation, they're on the hook for $400,000, that family. And so there's just no way. The world is a massive Ponzi scheme. And really, I don't know that the debt is ever going to be paid down. And I don't see how it's going to have to be one massive jubilee. If I'm ever named global emperor, I'm going to declare a jubilee.
Now, wonderful. Now, you bring up a lot of interesting points there. We have, not yet, but trending in developed countries, yes, declining population, lessening GDP. This is starting to paint an ugly picture, but there's a but coming up. Opportunities in more cost-effective energy, changes in the dynamics of AI, and is that going to cause or create an opportunity for us to get out of this mess?
Well, then I would invite anyone who asked that question. So there's a kind of debate style. I'm not saying we're doing it here, but where someone raises their hand, someone's made a point and go, Professor, isn't it possible that? But that's not an argument. And so the isn't it possible, like, okay, well, sketch me for 5 minutes a scenario where AI is gonna magically solve problems. And that's, in the old Greek plays, when a playwright got himself into a plot, painted himself into a corner in a plot. It was called Deus ex machina. God would pop out from the floorboards and problem solve. Like Zeus would pop out and Deus ex machina, and so AI is Deus ex machina. Oh yeah, it's going to pop out of the floorboards and solve our problems. I'm not saying it can't, but remember that AI is going to displace. We've talked about this for years, Angelo, you and I, like, I don't know, 8-10 years.
You're
We're
right.
on this theme. AI, it is clear within 5-10 years max that virtually all jobs are rendered, as they say in England, redundant. You're not needed. You have an algorithm, a suite of algorithms that can out-lawyer any lawyer or out-analyze any Wall Street analyst or accounting. It's interesting, the knowledge professions, knowledge workers, as Drucker called them, they're going to be the first to go.
Oh, absolutely. You could be a hairdresser, a athlete, and entertainer. For a while, plumber, you're probably pretty darn safe.
Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, and we haven't worked those things out. And the thing is, Angelo, that we it's hard to imagine even 2 or 3 years in the future, which is one reason, by the way, Angelo, for the plummeting birth rate. I don't know if you saw the recent statistic. So I think the replacement birth rate, to keep population in the U.S. stable, is 2.13 or something like that. The latest numbers, like the lowest in recorded history, it's like 1.6 and plummeting.
And worse in other developed countries.
Yes. The only regions that are still growing are Africa and parts of the Middle East and some. Also,
and a little bit of Indonesia, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly, yes.
Correct.
But even there, the second derivative is negative. So they're still increasing, but at a much slower rate. We're declining. And so these are really serious problems because we piled up the debt assuming we could grow our way out of it. And now it's not clear. And by the way, with Angelo, with AI, remember it's a winner takes all economy we're moving towards. You wanted to talk about Nvidia. Well, Nvidia's gains are Intel's and everybody else's losses. So I know the top chip manufacturers have been in decline last few weeks. But up till April 11th, this is what, the 24th, 25th, up till a couple weeks ago, they were all-time highs. I'm talking about Nvidia and a few others. All the average semiconductor stock was negative for the year because the gains of Nvidia and a couple other companies were coming at the cost of all the others. And so, there's that old joke, where does an 800-pound gorilla sit, right? And we're entering an economy with a few 800-pound gorillas that are going to run everything.
Okay, now Adam, at an event, I think it was Tamarack Country Club Greenwich 2018, you hinted at it, and that was, by AI standards, centuries ago. We're just talking 6 years. I looked you in the eye in person and said, what's the limited window that we have? I think you might have said 10 years. What's the window that we have to have some level of freedoms to make a lot of money before it only goes to those that already have money, governments and institutions, because AI is going to make it more difficult.
It'll make it very difficult.
For that now.
So, in a sense, the ability to make money in anything it's a reward for seeing the future more clearly and more accurately than anyone else, right? You don't need to see everything, but some little corner of the world, you have to see better and more clearly than other people. And so with AI, you will have programs, right, that see way more clearly than you do, than everybody does. And whoever owns those programs, it's game over for everybody else. And I know we were talking about that back in 2018. Angelo, I can't remember, because it was around then, that year, I was in LA, and I was at a fundraiser, and I get to talking to this fellow. We had a very interesting conversation for about half an hour about this and that. And my go-to question is never, so what do you do? It's never the first thing I ask, but we've been talking for a while, and it's very engaging. And I said, so what do you do? And he said, I'm an AI consultant for the government. And I can't mention some of my clients, but very high level. Anyway, it turns out he's got Pentagon level clearance. And I start to rave. This is 2018. I start to rave about, rhapsodize about Google's DeepMind, right? Which is AlphaZero Go and AlphaZero Chess, which is extraordinary achievements. And now it's really incredible. So I was rhapsodizing, and I said, wow, because I had talking to someone who knows AI. And I said, wow, Google's DeepMind. And he listened with a polite smile. There's a mic drop moment coming in a few seconds here, Angelo, for your listeners.
I am ready.
And so he listens with a very polite smile, and he said, Adam, there are government labs that are 5 years ahead of Google.
Exactly.
Said, right? And I told you that back then. So I did say that back then. Yeah. 5 years ahead of Google.
And does that likely include China as well?
Well, hold on, I'll tell you. So that I said 5 years, because that's an eternity. 5 years. Oh my gosh. Imagine a race in the tech space right now, and you've got a 5-year lead. He said, Adam, Google is bragging about stuff that I saw years ago. They're bragging about it right now. I saw it years ago. And in fact, these government labs have put the stuff on the shelf because they've moved on to other things. And why is that so important? And I'll get to a few more details in a second. It's important because in calibrating risks, there's that great Gretzky quote, a good hockey player goes to where the puck is, and a great one goes to where it's going to be. And I'm telling you, as you calibrate around investment opportunities, it's much further along than whatever you think. And I asked him which government labs, and he said JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, NASA. And I asked, my next question was, where is China in this? And he said, he thought for a second, and he said, they're 2 or 3 years behind us, best estimate, but catching fast. Now, the thing about China, and and I've been talking about China and all this for wow, 7, 8, 9 years, since we started our talks, actually. But the thing that China has that we don't is access to data.
Yes.
Right? The CCP, they have all data on all citizens. But we don't. It's siloed here or there, right? Google has some, Amazon has some, Apple, Facebook, it's all siloed. Now imagine they're competing AI with companies that have access to all the data available. So it's not siloed, right? And as you know, as these large language models have proven in other models, the more data you have, the better. That's the key competitive advantage, access to data. The models themselves are kind of the same. It's access to the data.
Well, then what's the implication for Silicon Valley companies like Google, aka Alphabet, Meta? Like, how does that intertwine with the US government, our interest, and how can we look forward, not to compare or compete US and China, but let's also face reality. We need to look at these things.
So I can't say because but I've approached people in the government about this, and so wait, what can I say? Well, here, I'll reference a book, Co-optition. So Co-optition was written, golly, I guess about 25 years ago. And it's a conflation of competition and cooperation. And it's a great read. I recommend it to anyone. Is that who your competitors are and who your allies are changes depending on the situation. Right. So, for example, Facebook.
Look at World War II.
Well, so Facebook and Google are competitors in many respects, but dealing with legislation from Capitol Hill, they're best buddies. They are best buddies. And so depending on the situation, you can compete actively with a company. And yet, you know what? On this issue, maybe we should share. And I realize that there are laws that, prohibit that, like antitrust. But I think an enlightened legislature will find its way around that.
Indeed. And by the way, there's no chance this podcast is going to be a short 2 hours. So get your Ovaltine, like my mom used to say, load up your coffee. We're having a good time. Those of you that are part of the live participant, except for Tyler, thank you, Tyler, you're all being too quiet. So I only have about 46 more questions. We won't get to all of them, but I want you guys to interact as well. Right before we move to that next question, today's podcast, Family Office TV, is brought to you by, well, one day I want to say that. I want to be like Tim, Adam. I want to have AG1 Athletic Greens. I want to have these amazing sponsors. So for now, the sponsor is little old me. It's Family Office TV. It's Angelo Robles. Go to angelorobles.com. I'm doing incredible things that I'm excited about, mainly my ultra-private 30-person founder private membership club dedicated to really incredible families. Simply go to angelorobles.com and go to membership and learn more. I'll weave in a couple of intertwining points. And people like Adam, who are primarily based in New York, as I'm going to be very active in New York over the summer, it was mainly Palm Beach in the winter, in-person small gathering soirees. Imagine the real conversation with the gloves off that we could have with someone like Adam and a lot of my good friends and families that are true world's leading incredible investors. And just the insight last week in Palm Beach blew me away. So hopefully you can look into being a part of our 30 founders, and we'd greatly appreciate it. One day, Adam, Athletic Greens is going to come calling. I just need a couple of 100,000 more followers. We'll see.
Did you ever see the movie Bowfinger?
No.
So Bowfinger is with Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy. It's very funny, a lot of giggles. Heather Graham. And so Steve Martin plays a Bowfinger. It's a lot of giggles in the movie. He plays a producer, and he's very, he's never really made it big, but he said, "I'll know I've made it big when a FedEx truck comes down the street and stops in front of my bungalow." So the whole movie is like, and finally, at the end of the movie, a FedEx truck pulls up and stops.
I had one outreach relatively recently. let's call it a little bit of me traveling the world, meeting amazing billionaires and families and asking them kind of my slightly quirky Angelo questions. So it has gotten a little bit of attention by a couple of influential people. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on a little bit. And this relates a little bit to AI and China. I've read, yet somehow when I went to look it up, it was very difficult. But I've heard from very influential three-letter agency people, I have a couple of interesting friends too, that Chinese deep fakes are causing havoc with multiple Fortune 500 companies, tricking the hell out of them, siphoning them of knowledge and money. And what are we going to do about this other than deep fake technology and better AI and more awareness with Americans or really others of the threats that we truly face?
So that's such a good question. So I'm just pausing because there's so many entry vectors to it. So in today's world, we have to, the word evidence, right, comes from the Latin to see. And right now, you really got to trust evidence, right? You have to trust what you're seeing. And so these deep fakes have been an issue for a while. And I have no doubt, Angelo, but that they have already insinuated themselves in ways that we can't actually know. And so, you know, I'm going to give a little primer on Bayesian probability.
Ooh,
right?
I like it.
And so Bayes was a I think he was a monk, but anyway, he came up with Bayesian probability, which is that you have a probability estimate and you update it based on the incoming data, right?
Of course. Sounds like playing poker.
Well, so right, each new hand you update, recalibrate on the data, right? You have, right, and so okay, now that sounds like, oh, of course, but people don't actually do that. And so when you're, let's say, here's one way to think about it, is that if a deep fake was actually going to be material, it would have to do something pretty outrageous, right? If there's a deep fake of Adam walking down the street in a top hat, you'd go, that's entirely consistent with Adam. If you have a deep fake of Adam, out dribbling, Curry on the court, that's probably a deep fake. That's not consistent with what I know about Adam. And so when you get evidence, is it consistent with what you already know? And if it is, then it's not moving the dial too much. What you're talking about is deep fakes that, whoa, this is very different from what I would have expected. And so, right, because otherwise it's the same as what we've seen, right? And so I think it's a very real possibility. And, with this, there needs to be a government, corporate partnership, right? With the government, the intelligence community, defense, homeland security, just around creating a consortium that can address these things. Because it's the individual, we run into the tragedy of the commons, right? No one corporation has any stake in addressing these things until it hits them. But so there should be some leadership coming from, probably from defense and maybe the intelligence community around addressing these issues, right? Because it's a very real possibility.
Of course. And Adam, trust me, we could dive into this for hours, but I am going to keep the questions coming.
Yeah, please.
By the way, my next comment was told to me by people that I know and trust. There is absolutely nothing online, speaking of Google again, and to back it up. It has a much lower number, but let's throw it out there because I believe what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Why I think there's multiple reasons, but the issue with Russia and the Ukraine and invading, I look at the minerals and value below the ground. We're told it's what, 8 trillion, 9 trillion. I've had multiple people tell me, bullshit, it's 30 trillion plus. And to not think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing what's going on. We're facing the realities again. We spoke about Putin in a prior podcast back
Yes, I
when
remember.
it was breaking out. Is this a part of it that simply Ukraine is valuable from a resources perspective?
So I'm going to give you the same answer I gave to you. I think it was the summer before last. It was when you asked me something else about Putin, and I said that the real question is what does Putin know that we don't? Right? Assume that Putin is perfectly rational. By the way, I'm not judging on moral. Like, please, it's an abomination, but an obscenity. But a rational actor surveys all the options he's got. Right? We talked about. I remember 2 years ago. Right? Summer.
Oh, I remember exactly what you said. You're saying it now.
I'm saying the same thing right now. Is what does he know where he wakes up one morning and goes,
right,
I know. Even though I'm going to be an international pariah, even though I might encourage coup d'etat within my own government, of all the things I should be doing today, I'm going to invade Ukraine. Right? That's my best play. And so what does he know where, again, we have to assume he's rational. Again, the morality is very clear, the immorality, but the rationality, it had to be a rational decision. If it was irrational, then there's no dealing with him. Then like he could do anything, right? Tomorrow he's just an irrational nut. But we have to assume that's not the case. And so I don't, it's clear, Angelo, that the stated reasons for fighting the war are insufficient.
exactly.
I don't know what the real play is, right? What the real play is. And, the thing is in geopolitics, you have to be really careful about a few things. And I'll make a point about Putin. He's Russian, he's a chess player. And you said you had a few chess questions for me.
Oh,
anyway,
I do.
So in chess, in the game of chess, what the master does is probes the other side for weaknesses. So step one, probe the other person's position, your opponent, probe his position, and in a sense, wait for him to make the teeniest little mistake. It won't even seem like a mistake. It'll, like in wrestling, like one wrestler will have his arm in a slightly awkward position and it's not the end of the match, but the fact that he's got his arm in the wrong position now, his opponent is going to use that. And so I'm saying, so step one, probe for weakness. Step two, once you've got a weakness, pile up on that weakness. That will force your opponent to concentrate all the defensive resources on that spot. And then you deliver the knockout blow somewhere else. So if we use that as a template for geopolitics, probe for weaknesses. Step one, probe for weaknesses. Step two, you found a weakness. Good. Pile up on that. And the other side is going to defensively contort themselves to protect that weakness. And then they've left themselves open over there. And that's where you deliver the knockout blow. So I have no idea. This to me is probing. This is not the end game. This is probing and piling on a weakness. Right? And look at the attention and cognitive bandwidth we spent on the unfolding horrors going on there. Unfolding. And and now also in the Middle East. And so the knockout blow, right? The next blow is going to come from some different direction. It's not going to be from those locales. Those, they call them theaters. It's not going to be the Mideast theater or Eastern Europe. It's going to come from somewhere else.
That is incredible insight, very thoughtful. And yes, audience, there's plenty of time to go. Yes, I know my list of questions will include faith, Caitlin Clark, and more on chess, and a whole bunch of other things. Relax, it's coming. Adam, why? This is going to get me in trouble again with family offices. Why don't most family offices find incredible investment opportunities? Are they simply sometimes, damn it, I hate to say it, too damn lazy?
Well, remember that investing for everybody, unless you are a dedicated day trader or something, but the way to think about investing is you make your money doing X, right? Including family fortunes. And made developing, we created NASCAR, whatever it is, or fashion brand or whatever it is. You make your fortune running a business. But then you have some expenses, things, that you use the cash for, and the rest of it you invest, right? But your main source of income really is from the business you're operating, right? And that's true at every level, even if you're not, you're running a massive family office, but you're reasonably well off, and you're a professional, and you're earning your money because you're a great brain surgeon or a lawyer or whatever, and you'll have some money left over after you've paid your taxes and expenses. You're going to invest, but that's not actually your main source of income. You just want that to grow. So I can understand that families would not give it that focus of attention. So something, Angel, I'm going to offer to you is, when it was Kahneman and Tversky, right, in the late 70s, right, behavioral economics.
Of course, legends.
Right, and one of their key. Really, they were psychologists. They weren't economists.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they showed the importance of the economic model of whatever economicus, right? Is Homo economicus, the rational man was greatly flawed. Anyway, it's this, that people will take chances to avoid loss way more than they will take chances for gain. So what you want to frame the advice that you're giving people is that if they don't act, they will lose money. Not that they're going to make less. They're going to lose money. That will get their attention.
Could that losing money, because it may not be so obvious on the surface, could I simply state that your true inflation is 15%, you're getting 6 or 7%, you're happy with that, you're losing purchasing power, you're going to notice it after decades?
Well, remember, a family office is only too happy for that kind of inflation because all their assets are getting inflated. They don't care. So the disposable income, I mean, your point is very well taken, right? But they don't actually care. They're like, price is going up, good. Everything I own is at least nominally, it's worth more dollars. And so
sports teams, etc.
Yeah, all that's going up. Okay, great. So you have to. I'm talking about that they stand to lose substantial amounts of money, yeah. Here's, people forget. It was what's that guy Minsky, right? The Minsky moment. That So Minsky was an economist, and his insight was that stability encourages instability, right? When things are stable for a really long time, then people go, oh, we don't have anything to worry about. Then they start moving out on the risk curve, and they start taking all kinds of opportunities because they don't worry about the bell curve outliers. But that very stability means the bell curve outliers aren't outliers anymore. They're almost certainties. And that's what we've got going here. And, here's one way to think about it. If you bought a home in the United States in the late 1920s, you didn't see that price again for 30 years.
Wow.
Right? 30 years. And, people, I'm going to circle back to something I said at the beginning. People take for granted things about the world. Like, oh, over time, real estate goes up in value. Yeah, but it can go down in value for decades. Yes, for sure, over centuries, but it can go down for 2 or 3 or 4 decades, no problem. And we don't calibrate very well around things that have a low probability.
Exactly.
Right, but the problem in human affairs is that all human beings are calibrating around that same low probability. So they're taking actions that makes that low probability a certainty. It's not low anymore because right, people have arranged their affairs going, I don't have to worry about that. Right? No need to hedge for that possibility. And so really it's very important to entertain, and it makes for interesting discussions over tea or the dinner table. Like, what would happen if this? Here, I'll give you an example. What would happen if the U.S. government declared a moratorium on interest payments on U.S. debt? There's a scenario. Oh, Adam, that'll never happen. Okay, but if it did, how would you deal with that? And what would happen in the world? And again, very important, again, to go back to Eisenhower, plans are useless in battle, but the act of planning is indispensable, right? You have to think these through, whether it's as an investor or you're just you're the head of a family, with generations, your children, your grandchildren, and possibly great-grandchildren that you've got to provide for.
Adam, what can I say? That's incredible. Back to my own question on investments and laziness. What I will say is my trip to Palm Beach, there were 3 families in our peer-to-peer. They were all wealth creators. I wonder if that says something. One of them from Texas, the ideas he had and what he shared and what he's doing in real estate, incredible. And other was not your favorite, but crypto. Very aggressive plays that were almost unfathomable, but what they were doing short term, good or bad, effectively memes, was crazy. But openness and sharing in biotech, there are some incredible.
Sorry, hold on. Sorry, the phone fell. I was positioning myself because the sun is moving, and I want to keep the light on my face there.
All right.
Okay.
There are some that are incredible, and finding them and getting them together and fostering conversations and knowing how to lead a dialogue, I'm telling you, it's the most insightful work that I've ever done, being a moderately active investor myself, and things that I'm learning and implementing in my new partial home of Wyoming and my holding company and my interests that I do. But we'll maybe get to a little bit of that in a second. I think you do have to get one of my Angelo questions. Here it comes.
I'll be right back. I'm just going to lower the blind here so I'm not blinded. Oh, there we go. Much better.
Okay.
Can you still see me okay?
Yes.
Excellent.
Faith in God's existence underpinned, I think, a lot of what we take for granted. Faith in God was invisible foundation for much of civilization. It's now on shaky ground. What does faith mean to you? And we see a decline of what I would deem to be, quote unquote, faith in religion, especially in developed countries in the West, that I could argue kept family units together, was a better situation for quote unquote, and I know I'm going on shaky ground in today's world. I don't care. I don't care about being politically correct. I don't want to be boring and vanilla. I want to ask questions that are provocative and cause different thoughts. So I know I'm going to hear some stuff here in the chat, but is a lack of faith, a lack of a respect of religion, no matter what we call, quote unquote, the higher one above, is this an issue with a lot of the issues that we're seeing now?
So, yes. So I have to parse that, right? So
I understand.
So hold on, entry point, give me a second. So I'm going to use the word and then I'm going to change the word in a bit. But for now, I'll use the word belief in. And so we're in a world now where nobody knows what to believe anymore, which goes back to deep fakes. Like, do I believe the experts? No, right? There's a crisis in science about replicability of studies. A major crisis. Something like 85–90% of scientific studies can't be replicated. Oh, good. Well, then it's not science, which means every time you read a study shows X. Well, there's an 80% chance that study is wrong. So there's been so notice that what I'm doing here, Angela, is approaching the question at a more abstract level. Faith in anything, whether it's faith in science, faith in experts. We have no faith in leadership anymore, right? We have no faith in our fellow Americans that they're going to do the right thing. I was speaking with a friend of mine, and when he was 12 years old, his dad was appearing in Congress to give testimony. And as a 12-year-old, my friend got to sit in on a meeting with his dad because no one objected. And mind you, this is a 12-year-old. And he said, I'm forgetting right now the names of all these luminaries, but they were noted right-wing Republicans and left-leaning Democrats who came together. And this 12-year-old was watching them, even though they were polar opposites on so many things. They were actually trying to work out a compromise, like, okay. And he got to see that. And this is years ago, right? Can you imagine Republicans and Democrats cooperating on anything right now? And so we've lost faith in Congress. In other words, we've lost faith in the fiduciaries who should be like, who do we trust right now? And so now, in the past, to go back to your question about God, in the past, even if you doubted everything, at least God. At least I'm sure on that. And now sorry, I just got to adjust these notifications. So we've lost faith across the board. And if you don't want to use the word faith, just what do you believe in right now?
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to the notion of trust. What can you trust? You used you said shaky ground earlier about you being on shaky ground. And one of the reasons earthquakes are so terrifying.
Oops, hopefully Adam was on his cell phone. He'll bounce right back like he did the last time, everyone. Man, he is really good. Obviously, I don't agree with everything Adam says. We had a pretty significant disagreement on Bitcoin. And there's other things too. So here he comes. So you don't have to deal only with me. That'd get too boring. Here we go.
I got disconnected.
It's all good. Don't worry.
So I'm not worried. So I just wanted to explain I didn't jump off. So what do people in the world believe right now? And let's just deal with America. And really, what do they believe in? What do they trust? Who do they turn to in moments of doubt? Right? And right now it doesn't look like there's anybody. Worse, to the degree that people no longer trust experts, I said experts with air quotes, but experts and their leaders, people have become more heavily convicted of their own beliefs, what they think, right? So I don't know about them, but this is, you guys are wrong. I don't know what I believe, but I know that you're wrong. And, right. And that seems to be the strongest conviction, right? We believe in the errors of everybody else. And so this lack of faith in anything, right? It's not just God. Is very disturbing. There's no bedrock. I said earlier about, right, no stability. Where do you find stability? It was Descartes, to go back 500 years, Cartesian doubt, and so he was very worried as a philosopher. I mean, really worried that I don't know what to trust in the world, right? So he said, what can't I doubt? And he finally concluded, I can't doubt that I doubt, right? Don't just wait. I doubt, therefore I am, which became I think. But really it was I doubt. At least I can't doubt that I'm doubting, because if I doubt that, I'm doubting. And so where is the certainty in the world? Where is the certainty in the world? And I want to introduce this as a notion, as a fundamental notion for your clients, for anyone listening, on how to look at the world. Because if you're uncertain about next year, what do you do as an individual? What do you do as a corporation? I'll tell you what you do. You hoard. You start to go, I don't know what next year is going to be like, so I better stockpile food, some other provisions. Probably that's going to happen, but and corporations, same thing. I'm unsure whether the supply chains will be open next year, whether I'll be able to buy from China next year. Better stockpile that stuff right now, right? And so in a world of increasing uncertainty, that's a major cause of inflation. And economists don't have any model for this. Here's a thought experiment for you, Angelo, and for your listeners. Suppose tomorrow the price of foods jumped 25% for whatever reason. Right? There's a super volcano eruption in the Midwest, and the wheat knocked out or whatever. And if the price of food jumped 25%, maybe not overnight, maybe it's a month, 2 months. In classical economic theory, demand should go down. Oh no, if the price of essentials goes up, you will accumulate more. In fact, the price going up of an essential will drive demand up. And there's no model for that in classical economics. And uncertainty is a great driver there. So, yeah. So you're quite right about faith in God. And for me, I said I was going to use a word and then change it. Is the distinction between knowing something and believing something. So, for example, I know that that's the sun over there, and I know that my name is Adam, and I know that I live in New York City. Those aren't beliefs. I know that, and so
unless you're in a simulation, Adam, but then you're believed in that.
Sorry, what?
Unless you're in a simulation.
Wait, what about a simulation?
Are we in a simulation? Then do you really?
Wait. Let's not. I'm going to make a point. We can go there in a sec. But just I know those things, and I don't believe them. I know them. Okay, and so people often say things like this: I believe in X. They need to calibrate better and not use the word belief. Better word would be conviction level. And really, it's very important to calibrate around your conviction level on how much confidence you have in whatever judgments you're making. People calibrate way too high most of the time. Like, oh, I'm sure. So the issue of faith for me is not knowing not to trust or what to believe, which goes back to deep fakes and the
Yes.
self-serving of fiduciaries, whether corporate or elected.
Adam, there are so many follow-up questions from your answer that sadly we'll have to leave some on the cutting room floor. There's a lot to discuss. So we're going to move on to someone who always is an interesting and some would say controversial figure. Let's go to Elon Musk. Elon has expressed his desire, it's a little old now, but to increase his voting control of Tesla to around 25% before advancing Tesla's position in AI and robotics. The question, I guess, Tesla's board has faced various issues, including ongoing federal probes, a lawsuit over his 56, whatever it is, $1 billion pay package, and other things. Should Elon be forced to only focus on Tesla to receive the additional voting control?
Well, so Musk is a man of many gifts, and say as recently as 2 or 3 years ago, it seemed that he could do no wrong. He walked on water, and we marveled, how is he able to run not just Tesla, doing very well, stock going to all-time highs, but he's got SpaceX and that Boring company and the Hyperloop and solar panel thing. Maybe that was his brother's. My God, how does the man do so much? And now he's bought Twitter. And the thing is, you can't do all those things well. You just can't. And with all great respect to him, nobody can do that, you know. And the goal would be to find people that you really trust and let them run it, right? When Warren acquires a company, he doesn't change the management. Good, I acquired that company because I think their management is great. You guys do your thing.
How about when you think you're simply better than them and there's not a better option than you? I'm assuming Elon feels that way.
But I'm sure, the thing is, I'm sure he does, but then now you just have to look at the evidence, which goes back to the question, Elon, what would you need to see to tell you weren't at the top of your game right now? What evidence would you need to see? Now, back in the day, back in medieval times, there was an institution, known as the court jester. And the function of the court jester, it was just one function, which was to tell the king the truth. So the king knew that there were sycophants and all kinds of dangers in the court. He didn't know who to trust, not even his own judgment or her judgment in the case of a queen. So the court jester was the one person who could say whatever he wanted to say. In fact, he was required to do so without losing his head. So King Philip, of Spain, was it Portugal? Anyway, could say, I think I'm going to invade France. And the court jester might go, yeah, remember when your father tried that? And everyone in the court could laugh, right? So the laughing was to mask that he's actually telling the truth without contradicting the king, because it's just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. And so Elon Musk needs a court jester, and he really needs to listen to the court jester. And now there's no court; he doesn't have to save face, but he needs someone who's got to be empowered with, what are my blind spots? What am I missing? And you have to assume you're missing a ton.
Yes.
Right? That should be your default position. It's only, by the way, that's Buffett and, bless his soul, Munger's position was always, We're always more or less mistaken. We're going to try to minimize those losses and that's the mistakes and the errors. And by the way, that's what Munger attributed their success to. He said, Warren and I have gotten a lot more out of not being stupid, avoiding mistakes, than being particularly intelligent.
You beat me to the punch of one of my questions. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that might relate to my chess question too, by the way.
Ooh, maybe.
Adam, come back. I got so many great questions for you, including about Caitlin Clark and chess and many other things. So again, he's on a cell phone, so we're going to have to deal with some of this during our probably, 2.5, 3 hours. If we're fortunate, here he comes back.
I'm back.
Okay. We got a lot to discuss, Adam.
We must have like 43 questions left.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to buzz through them perhaps. Okay, the final one for now, a little bit related to what I built up on Elon. Is the Delaware court's ruling against Elon's compensation justified?
So, boy, that's a tough question. So there's the sort of the moral justification, and there's the legal one, right? And so I'm not sure. Like, I don't know the details on that. And one thing to think about is if it's not justified, I know who's going to respond: the shareholders. If they don't think it's justified, they're going to dump the stock. And maybe that's one reason the stock has been declining. It's like, it's very possible it may be that the price of Tesla stock is reflecting a bet on whether he's going to get that 56 billion, and as much as anything else. And so, in the marketplace, someone can ask for something like, I think my singing, I'll tell you something, Angelo, if they want me to sing at next year's Super Bowl, I'm going to ask for $100 million. If they want Adam, they're going to have to pay me $100 million. And you might say, is Adam justified in asking for that? and yes, he is. And even though he can't hold a tune. And, so the market will bear whatever the market bears. And if the market doesn't like what he's asking for, by the market, I mean his own shareholders, they'll start to dump the stock. And so, I talked before about the Bayes rule. Like, when you see evidence, which of two options is it supporting? So when we look at Elon Musk's actions over the last couple of years, and again, not to take anything away from him, he's accomplished a great deal, really extraordinary individual. Is it consistent with?
Hopefully it's not going to happen every 3 or 4 minutes, but it is what it is. Adam has great insight, and I get to ask questions that sometimes, honestly, other guests, they want a list of them. Well, you can't ask that. You can't ask that. Adam's like, bring it on. So I got to appreciate that about him. He really gets Angelo throwing everything at him. And like he said, 43 more questions to go, assuming he comes back. And yes, in case you're wondering, the Caitlin Clark question, which will actually get a little serious. It's not just only tongue-in-cheek, will be the next question up. Adam's taking just a pinch longer than normal. Everyone so far, I know we have a pretty significant live audience across multiple platforms. I hope you're enjoying it. Plenty more to go.
For the Garys of my internet connection, so I was referring to Elon Musk, and are his actions consistent with someone who's at the top of their game right now, or are they consistent rather with he's overextended? And I don't care who you are, you've got to know your limits, right? Clint Eastwood, you got to know your limits. And that was Musk and Munger, right? The circle of competence. And Musk has a very large circle of competence, but I don't care how large that circle is, it is possible to leap outside of it.
Of course.
Whoopsie.
And you mentioned the word competence. Actually, there's also, when I consultant work with family offices, mainly kind of quasi coaching executive. What's your confidence?
Sorry.
Identify your blind spots and move your ego aside. Be a lifelong learner. All those things tie in.
Wait. I didn't hear a thing because I was adjusting my phone here setup.
It's all good, Adam. It was just me identifying some of the work I do in one of the things, coaching family office executives. Identify your competence and get better. Know your blind spots. Move your ego aside. I might have took a little bit of that from some of Ray Dalio, but I think that's an incredible trio to keep alert to.
Well, wait. I want to jump on something just really quickly.
I can't get to Caitlin Clark, everyone. Continue.
Wait. This is a very important point. When you say things like put your ego aside, again, the question is, would you know that you need to put it aside?
No.
That's the problem. When you're in the stupid zone, you're not going to know that. You're not going to know that you should put it aside, right? And so that's the danger. It's easy to say those things. Put your ego aside. That's like,
That's why you need a coach and a mentor. You need someone to tell you the truth.
I
wish I had that over the years.
You need a court jester.
Yes, we're on the same page, Adam.
Yes, there we go. Okay, so you had a question about Caitlin, something?
So we're going to, a little tongue-in-cheek, but it may get a little serious. So will the Caitlin Clark effect make an impact not just on the WNBA, but effectively on this country and maybe beyond that? And is this a turning point in women's sports? And why is that important?
Okay, so can you clarify, sorry for my hand, can you clarify what you mean by the Caitlin Clark effect?
Okay, you asked for it, you're going to get it. I'm a big sports fan, have been since 1973, 74. I'm keeping it, as the young ones say, 100 with you. I effectively have respect for women's sports. I do watch some, I don't watch a lot, and I never really pay that much attention to NCAA female basketball or the WNBA. I know the barest minimal to be a little dangerous. And for the first time ever, just a couple of months ago, I paid less and less attention to men, both in the NBA and in the men's college basketball, even though UConn was winning it. And I could easily name you more female players in the NCAA and women's sports in basketball than I could men. And I would have laughed at you on December 31st if you told me that. And it was driven, and I don't know why, by Caitlin Clark. There's something about her that is incredibly intriguing and appealing to people. And I think it's making an impact. My part two, which I know annoys people.
Wait. I can't. Okay. That one part has like 5 subparts.
Oh, okay.
So can you state again, Counselor, can you sum up for the court? So about the Caitlin, so now I know what you mean by the Caitlin Clark effect.
Okay, but I could give you the part that I think is important, Adam. The important part is the WNBA has been around since 1997. Let that sink in, because a lot of you don't know that. Kind of almost 30 years. How many years has it been profitable? It's 0. It's subsidized partially by the NBA, and the NBA commits, I think it's $15-20 million a year. It does not make money. I think this will be the first time we're going to see her impact in the WNBA. It's going to drive attendance in the stands. That drives concessions. That's going to get a far better quote unquote TV contract.
Yeah.
Where the real money is.
I got your question.
It will change the dynamic of the WNBA.
Okay. So I have, I was a competitive athlete, swimmer for many, many years. And I like watching championship anything. I mean, I like anyone at the top of their game. You could say, Adam, that bricklayer you're not going to believe how good he is. I could watch a master bricklayer. Anyone at the top of their game, I will be fascinated by. And I will have questions for that person. And so with sports games, and I'm going to circle around this because there are a lot of interesting points you raised, as you always do, is why do we watch a game? So one thing is because I'm seeing like the best two teams, and it's high stakes, right? I remember once being enthralled by a men's volleyball, NCAA men's volleyball championship, which there's the sport that I like watching the women's version more than the men's.
In today's world, Adam, you can't say that. That's why I don't get a lot of subscribers. I get shadowed.
Well, okay. Fortunately, you don't have to worry about AGI just yet. Anyway, expertise at any level is worth watching. Now here, I'm going to make a proposal, actually. And, I'm going to talk about baseball and how the rules of baseball change. So over time, there's a balance between, does the pitcher have the edge or the batters? And so there are times when the pitchers are getting too good for the batters, and they got to change the rule because they got to make it a little more equal, right? So it's actually a contest that has some interest. And we have that in golf with handicaps, right? I don't care who the players are. In chess, in speed chess, if I were playing Magnus Carlsen, I'd get 5 minutes and he'd have a minute, or maybe even he'd have 30 seconds and I'd have 10 minutes. I'm a master, but that's how he would just destroy me, right? And so the way to make things interesting is to handicap one side in horse racing, right? So here's the proposal. If you want women's sports, because they're just not because we know it's not the level of expertise is just not what we see with the men. It's just not. And and it's true actually in things that you would think that they would be kind of equal at. For example, billiards, right? That doesn't require a lot it requires almost no strength, right? And I think the world record for shooting balls in for men is something like 600, something like that. And for like in a row, right? Without just keep re-racking it. And for women, it's like 180 or something. It's way less. And so if your interest in a game is to watch excellence, right? Then you'll watch the most excellent version of it. But I think they could make women's sports more engaging for everyone by introducing some handicaps. Like right now, there's a lot of political correctness around, and boy, oh boy, the whole transgender athletes, competing with the women's sports.
You are getting me in all sorts of trouble.
No, I'm the one voicing these things.
Already the bad boy, the family office world. You're making it. I can be really lean into that now. Why not?
Okay, but I'm the bad cop here. You can say, okay. Adam,
I'm for change. I'm going to be the good cop. Yes.
You be the good cop. You can be outraged. Adam, I'm outraged that. Yes. These comments of yours. So, but I can simply say those who find that an issue, and I'm not going to say who. Like if you take it just to a really vicious level, imagine mixed martial arts. There, you're going to let a man go in the ring with a woman? No, and cis or whatever. Anyway, so my point is this: though, you could actually by handicapping it, and then it might be actually a lot of fun, right? You like in the same way that it's interesting, Adam playing Magnus Carlsen in speed chess by adjusting our respective time limits so that Adam's got some kind of chance. I'm sure there's always a way to even.
Now, Adam, we have some disagreements here, and shockingly, me, an old school Latino Italian so-called masculine man with a beard and tattoos. We're going to get to that actually in a second. I think you're comparing apples and oranges. So when I watch, and again, I'm pretty new to this, when I'm watching women's basketball, I see a skill level, if I define it as skill, as no different than the men. The men are more athletically gifted, testosterone muscularity, jumping ability, but pure skill, passing, shooting, teamwork. And do I want to get in the ring with a top level, quote unquote, heavyweight female fighter and I dabble a little bit? I don't. Again, I think you're comparing a little bit. It's the same genre of a fruit, but you're comparing apples and oranges.
But here's the thing. Really, you think if we take a dunking contest, right? Every year, NBA dunking contest, do you think a woman's going to win?
Yeah, but that's on, they don't have, in general, the muscularity and height of men. And
but then it's not apples and oranges. I'm just saying that's part of the skill of the game.
Well, how about passing? Passing. We're all on the same footing then.
Yeah, but, like making a 3-pointer from half court, who's going to make that? Anyway, I'm not saying, well, let me just get my point out. So the balletics, I'm not saying that the teamwork and everything can actually, might actually be superior to men's. I'm leaving that open. I don't know actually enough about women's basketball, to be fair. And it may be by some metrics, they do a number of things way better than men. Way better. It is possible. So I'm conceding that. I'm not even asserting a point on that. I'm just saying that in terms of viewers, they don't get many viewers, and there must be ways to make it more interesting. That old betting trope. When you're playing someone for poker and the person and you think, oh, it's just a friendly game, and the person says, let's make this interesting. And, you start to play for some real stakes. I am sure there are ways to inject components of that new aspects to the game that would generate newfound interest to people who had never watched women's basketball. Again, if I see two, I was a swimmer back in the day. I love watching age group swimming. And I marvel that kid is the fastest 14-year-old in the country. And I'm not comparing that kid against the NCAA, a final 100-yard freestyle. But still, for 14-year-olds, that's very impressive. And I'll watch it, and I'll still have interest in that. So I don't care what it is. In other words, within women's basketball, I am sure I would find the NCAA, the championship, just as fraught with, that kind of tension and part of it is the fan, the fan cheering and everything. And so I don't think they should compete together. I think that's unfair to I don't even know what to call them anymore. Biological women.
Well, I mean, we'll potentially see what the future holds in that. Interesting discussion. Again, I don't want to dive. Ladies, finally, after 2 years in purgatory, am I back on your good side now? Look at this. Like, who would have guessed this like a year or two ago? I actually think, and probably my last comment on it, Caitlin Clark's impact will extend beyond the WNBA and make a significant impact. We already know that 2/3 of college graduates are women. There's dynamics that are changing. I actually think that it's younger men that are quote unquote struggling when you look at the statistics in a variety of different things. So,
for sure.
It's, I mean, suicide and challenges in relationships and the issue with education. But again, I have now only 39 more topics to cover. Okay, we'll go a little tongue in cheek on this one, Adam. But I'm actually, it's actually a little serious. And I hinted at it earlier. In the world of podcasting, you're kind of a star, so you tell me. You got Joe Rogan, you got Williamson, you got, of course, Ferriss, you got Tom Bilyeu. I love them all. I think they're better than me. They're probably better looking too. They also probably at one time might have had hundreds of thousands a month of marketing going into them. And I wonder if there are star makers. Do I think I'm incredible? No. But do I think that I could go long form and ask highly interesting questions? Yes. Yet one of my platforms, after 8 months, only has like 500 subscribers. Pardon my arrogance here. You got to be kidding me. So what does it take Does the system make you a star, or is it up to you and money matters to grow your audience?
So, it would be worth deconstructing. For you, deconstructing why people tune into the Tim Ferrisses of the world and Shane Parrish and Williamson, and they're all brilliant. These guys are all,
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
I know
brilliant.
they're smarter and better looking than me.
Well,
That's it. I got excuses. I'm a victim now.
No, but they have cast a very wide net, right? And yours is focused on a particular domain, things of interest to family offices and high net worth, ultra high net worth families and such, and so you've carved out that niche, and so you should be a little suspicious if you had 500,000 subscribers, because then yes, you have more subscribers, but their level of engagement is way lower. I'm sure the 500 people who do tune into you really are taking notes, applying things, or following up with questions afterwards. And so you want an engaged audience, and there are metrics for that. And for you, that you're looking to build your family practice, your business, right? Getting the word out and sharing what you know, and that's a rarefied demographic, right? Niche.
Yes. I mean, again, like I said earlier, I think it's a vanilla, boring industry. People don't always tell you the truth. Everything is very safe, politically correct, down the middle. Honestly, there's a lack of intellectual rigor. 99% of events are heavily sponsored, mediocre speakers, not a lot of true people there. I was a little part of that for a number of years. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but the capability of me, traveling the world, creating family offices in Nigeria, United Arab Emirates, Switzerland, the US, the activity that I have. And I know this is probably coming across the wrong way to some people, but I'm just looking at it from the reality of I see the community and me wanting family offices to be so much better than they often are. Anyway, enough about that. That's me getting on a soapbox, but I appreciate your comments. I do think they're good. And by the way, all those people I mentioned, Billy Yu, Rogan, they're incredible. I love podcasts. I learn so much. In many ways, they're so much better than me. But I do sometimes take pride in the uniqueness of my questions, that I have gotten some prominent people that have reached out and say they appreciate it. Like you said, one of my audiences on one of my platforms may be modest, but it's powerful, connected, wealthy. And some of them are influential people that I do appreciate the kind comments they send me in text and emails. A question staying a little bit on the theme that we left off with Caitlin, but a little different perspective. And maybe this is the why I sometimes get shadow banned, I don't know. Is Taylor Swift's impact on the NFL, her relationship with Travis Kelce, was that a little bit arranged? Was that a psyop?
Well, so I love these questions because there's no way to actually know. I mean,
of course not.
There was a Saturday Night Live skit many years ago, and the skit was, what would have happened in World War II if Eleanor Roosevelt could fly? And they have
that would defy dynamics or flight patterns.
You're missing the bottom line. They have her. The skit was that she's leading a squadron of fighter planes. She's going like this, leading our brave young fighter pilots into battle. And so some of your questions are like that. So for me, Taylor Swift, I don't know. There's that old Roman saying, cui bono, like who benefits from this? So if it were a psyop, what's the end goal here? What's the end game?
Well, there is an end goal, potentially. And again, this is us in theory. She has an audience that probably is not the most interested in the NFL, that brings them their audience. And the typical person who watches the NFL is arguably not the biggest Taylor Swift fan. They're cross-pollinating their audiences, benefiting both.
Well, I really, but yeah, I'm just tickled I'm conjuring up a meeting between the head of the NFL and Taylor Swift's managers talking about, if we imagine the number of tweens that they'll discover football and the number of football players. Remember that Saturday Night Live skit, Dub Airs, who are going to put down their beer mugs and watch Taylor Swift.
The NFL and Taylor Swift are both more popular since that pairing.
Okay, so temporarily, so there has a kind of sort of a idiosyncratic interest, of the moment. But is that going to result in enduring changes in their respective constituencies? I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, Travis Kelce's jerseys, he's an incredible player. He'll be a Hall of Famer. But
Indeed.
I believe it might have been number one. A tight end's jersey should not be number one. She helped to drive the audience for that. And I think a little bit of vice versa. And I think the TVs, the studios, they played it up. They played into it. Again, what's the point here? And how does this impact family offices? I have no idea. But again, you wanted a little bit of something different compared to the other people in the community while you're getting it. Adam, I got to ask you some questions on chess. You hinted at one of them indirectly a little while ago. In getting better at chess, is making less mistakes maybe more important than being truly brilliant?
So, yes and no. And I'm going to make a larger point. I'm going to generalize from chess to all domains that the skills required to beat the average weekend tennis player are very different from the skills required to, compete at a varsity college level, much less, becoming a professional tennis player. So in many domains, not just chess, simply avoiding blunders and just having some basic skill sets, you're going to be doing better than 95% of people who attempt that, right? And then if you want to go beyond that, then you can then it is different, right? Then it is different. And, one of the challenges for someone like at Magnus Carlsen's level, right? If you're a top 100 chess player, it becomes really difficult because even a draw against anybody else is going to lower your rating.
Exactly.
Right? Fischer, as you know, was my mentor back in the day. And his problem was that anybody he played, he had to play for a win because even a draw, his rating would go down. And so it meant he would have to take chances to win the game.
He was deemed to be an aggressive player, correct?
Well, his goal, so I'm going to make a point here. There are two ways to play life. You can play it to win or not to lose. And he played to win. Now, that's different. Remember, Buffett, his point of investing, first rule of investing, never lose money. Second rule, never forget rule number one. And his point was this: if you invest and you don't take stupid risks, invest prudently, over time, your investment should go up over time. Not all investments, but the value of U.S. enterprises goes up over time. Has to, because human beings get better able to do things, right? I don't care what the company is, whether it's a McDonald's restaurant or it's a factory churning out cars. The McDonald's restaurant today is way more efficient than the McDonald's restaurant, 20 years ago. Same with an auto factory. So the value of business enterprises has to go up over time because we get better able to do things. I say over time. And so in a lot of domains, as long as you don't lose, you're going to win. With Fisher, he played to win as opposed to not wanting to lose. So he always took chances.
And if you had to give a tip for how to get better faster in playing chess, what would it be?
Well, it would be the same kind of tip I would make for any domain. If you said, for example, let's say I was a world famous guitarist or flamenco dancer or whatever it is, you'd say, Adam, if I wanted to get decent at playing the guitar, what songs or chords should I learn? I'd say, you know what? You can impress the folks at the family reunions or dates or whatever else by learning these 3 songs. Just learn these 3 chords. Same with chess, is to learn they're known as opening repertoires. Play the same opening for white and for black, and learn that really well, as opposed to learning lots of different kinds of openings. And so, again, not just with chess, but anything. You want to get good at it, master a few things that'll get you, again, a pretty astonishing degree of competence pretty quickly. And then, of course, in other words, your bell curve, your learning curve starts off like a rocket ship, and then it kind of levels off. And to go up another level, then you're going to have to spend a lot of time. But anyone can achieve competence. I'm sure I could become a decent piano player of a few songs by watching some YouTube videos and just playing 15 minutes a day. I'm sure I could get, impress, people who are easily impressed. And they would assume that my skill set was much larger. Like, wow, Adam can play that Bach concerto. Like, it's unbelievable. They don't know that that's the only thing I can play.
And maybe lastly on chess, Adam, and maybe the most important question among our probably multi-hour interview here. I interviewed him once. I enjoy him. I'm sure you know him. Tell me that you could whip James Altucher's ass in a bout of chess.
So I know James. I mean, we're probably comparable level, like he, same master level.
And James, I love you, brother. It was a great interview 2 years ago. I'm just being funny.
Yeah, no, we're probably comparable,
Okay.
Rating wise.
Do you, of course, it's a hypothetical question. Would Bobby Fischer have made a great hedge fund manager?
So someone like Fischer probably would. Now, Fischer was extraordinary, and I'm going to say this because it's not well appreciated. So no one has ever existed in any domain like Fischer. And I'm not saying that just because I knew him leading up to his winning the world championship. So get this, at the age of 6, his 8-year-old sister, Joan, bought him a chess set to keep him occupied after school, right? Latchkey kids. So at the age of 6, he got a chess set. At the age of 12, that's 6 years later, that's all he did was just play chess. He's merely a good 12-year-old, not a prodigy, a good 12-year-old, right? The next year at the age of 13, he played a game that to this day they say is the game of last century at the age of 13. At 14, remember at 12, he was merely a decent 12-year-old after 6 years of nonstop studying. 14, he's US champion. And at 15, he was number 5 in the world. And so Fischer was really singular, and his goal was to beat the Russians and win the world championship. And so he had a big problem because the entire Russian chess establishment was determined to stop him, right? They were studying his openings, and I've talked about this like with Tim, maybe I talked about it with you too. He played the same opening repertoire for like 13 years. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're Frank Brady, and you go, here, this is my notebook of plays. I'm only going to use one of these plays in any football game. So study this because that's all I'm ever going to do. And that's what the Russians did. He did that for 12, 13 years. And in the world championship, he switched it up. It was one entire long con. And so here's the problem with chess. So I say that because Fisher was, imagine, Angelo, a kid picks up a tennis racket and some years later, without ever being coached, wins Wimbledon, right? That's never going to happen, except for Fisher. Anyway, so Fisher was an exception, but chess is not a good. Great chess players tend not to do well in that skill doesn't transfer. Here's why: the chessboard, you see all the pieces. There's no hidden information. Mm-hmm. And the value of the pieces is known to both players. I can see what the other side is doing. I don't know what he's thinking, but I can see what he's doing. Like, imagine a poker hand where we both see each other's cards. Okay? I don't know what you're thinking, but I see your cards. And so chess as an exemplar for thinking doesn't apply in the real world, because real world things are changing all the time. And there's all kinds of information asymmetries, right? It's not a little chessboard that you can, like 2 by 2, you can see the whole thing. Oh no, the real world there's countless variables. So it doesn't, skill at chess transfers over to skill at nothing else.
Although when I asked you, you do believe, after you hesitated a little bit, that if he put his mind to it, he would be maybe an extraordinary hedge fund.
I'm saying Fisher would have been.
I know, Fisher specifically.
Okay, so Fisher was, wow. I have a friend who speculated, Fisher won the world championship in 72. So I knew him leading up to his winning the world championship. And a year late, so he was on the Bob Hope show, movie star handsome. He was the most famous person in the world. Mm-hmm. Number 2 that year was Muhammad Ali.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, number 2 was Muhammad Ali. That gives you an idea of Fisher's, celebrity. Wow, off the charts, right? The brash American who did it all alone during the Cold War. And a year later, he's walking the streets of Pasadena, homeless, muttering to himself. And a friend said he's pretty sure the KGB drove him insane. And that makes total sense, because Fisher snatched the world championship away from the Russians. And a year later, he's basically lost his mind. And there's no way in a year you get that kind of decline. Really, people should see interviews like Bob Hope, Dick Cavett. It was extraordinary. Johnny Carson. Really, movie star handsome, clever, funny, engaging. And a year later, he's talking to himself, walking the streets, homeless. So Fisher was still, it's once a century kind of individual. It's a shame. And people talk about his he lost his mind, became anti-Semitic. He was Jewish.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it really warped his mind. I'm sure it was. He forfeited the world championship, and the Russians said, "Thank you very much for giving it back to us." It's the only way they could.
It's often me going off course and having follow-up, and we're probably not going to be able to get to the remaining 34, but I'm going to cherry pick, I think, some good ones. We'll maybe go a little bit of rapid fire. Is TSCM the most important company in the world?
Well, so for those who don't know, Taiwan and semiconductors and stuff. So semiconductors are a key, we're talking about supply chains and things you really need. Well, you really need semiconductors in the world right now, right? And so I don't, so I will tell you, I will give your audience members, a way to look for this. There's no sign of an invasion imminent or anything into Taiwan. None, zero. So the indicator to watch is defense stocks relative to industrials. Defense stocks relative to industrials. And so ITA is the defense stock ETF. So you look at how defense stocks are doing relative to other industrial stocks, and you'll get a very clear bead on the market's assessment of, geopolitical risk. And right now, defense stocks relative to other industrials are at 2-year lows. 2-year lows. They're lower than they were before Putin invaded Ukraine. Again, I'm talking on a relative basis, right? Which is the key thing. Not defense stocks are 2-year lows. I'm saying defense stocks relative to other industrial stocks are 2-year lows. And they bolted higher right before Putin invaded Ukraine. In fact, like a good 2 months before Putin invaded Ukraine, 3 months actually, defense stocks were rocketing higher. And so there's no indication right now that there's going to be any invasion of Taiwan. And by the way, defense stocks are 2-year lows on a relative basis, even though you got the ongoing war in Ukraine, you got the ongoing war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right. So that says something. It means like, whoa, there's not a lot of geopolitical threat right now. Doesn't mean it can't change. But I would tell you that those that if you were going to launch a military campaign, it's very hard to keep that a secret. And so people knowing that that's going to happen, they position themselves in financial markets. And so there's no sign of an invasion of Taiwan. And markets would pick it up pretty quickly, which is, when I say markets, I mean those who figure out, oh boy, there's going to be an invasion. We would see it. We would see Taiwanese stocks start to crater. We would see maybe some impact on the Taiwan, their currency, the dollar there, and we'd see it in U.S. defense stocks, but we're not seeing that.
And Adam, a little bit of a technical question. I could, for the audience, give a definition, but they could figure it out. How can we solve LLMs, large language models, from hallucinating?
So, well, that is a technical question, and I don't know enough about the programming that goes in around the hallucination effects, because instead of asserting I don't know, it'll make something up, right? It'll fill in gaps.
Yes.
And so maybe try this. I just inspired by your question. One of the workarounds to get LLMs to say things that they don't want to say, for example, if you said, what ingredients would I need to create a bomb, the LLM would say, I can't answer that. But there are ways around that. If you said, if you were not imitating, but if you were, what would another LLM that knew it shouldn't do that, what would it say? Like, there are ways to ask the question that will wind up giving you how to build a bomb. And so why am I saying that? Is maybe the way to prevent the hallucination is, what gaps might you have in answering this question? And you would know, like, for example, you could say, if you were going to be unsure about anything or hallucinate about anything, which aspect of the 500 pages of text you just gave me would be most suspect? Like, you could ask it to opine on its own, flaws. But I think that's it. If you ask it a question, it's going to give you an answer. If it doesn't have one, it's going to make one up. And you don't want it to do that, right? If you don't know, then say, I don't know, like I do.
Well, I think related to that, how can biases, and we saw it a couple of months ago with Google, How could biases be mitigated in AI algorithms and models?
So what those of you who don't know what Angelo is referring to, what, Angelo, you remind me of Johnny Carson, because Johnny Carson, he was so affable and right but he was brilliant, and he would have like Nobel laureates on the show. And right, you watch these old film clips, and he's got some Nobel laureate talking high-level physics, and Carson will interject, and he'd say, "Well, I think what you mean," and he would explain the concept really simply for the Nobel laureate, right? And so you do the same thing. You have these really deep questions that are. So you got to simplify for your audience there. So what you're referring to is racist comments that start showing up, or sexist, or in these large language models. And I think it comes up in the programming in the following way. Not through there's no intentionality to it. So I'll give you a metaphor around training AI. So they wanted to train about 15 odd years ago, 15, maybe 20 years ago, they wanted to train a video camera to recognize the difference between a dog and a wolf. And that's very hard, right? Because dogs, unless you're talking about a little chihuahua, a lot of dogs look a lot like wolves, and it's hard to imagine an AI system. So what they got a system to do it pretty well. The problem was that what the system was picking up on was snow. If there was a lot of white stuff around, it would say wolf. And it was right, because that was the pictures they had of wolves, right? Not walking down Park Avenue. And so what they weren't training it. They thought they were training it to distinguish wolves from dogs, but all they trained it to do was identify snow. That's all they trained it to do. And so with these models, a sufficiently random series of inputs would help mitigate that. And there's probably some, like the math, I forget the formulas, but around the convergence and locking in on an optimal kind of value where the standard error drops down to some minimum is maybe introduce some randomness to that. Mm-hmm. I know genetic algorithms aren't used as much as they used to be, but introduce some randomness and see whether it converges to the same value. Maybe that would help. But I think that's easily solved. I don't think that's a big deal, frankly.
I mean, I guess it sequences in. How can AI systems be made more, I think the word is interpretable, meaning capable of being understood and transparent?
Well, they can't be transparent. And this is one of the big problems, is because you're dealing with neural nets that have maybe 50 layers, and each layer, 50 layers of nodes, like interconnected synapses, and each layer has maybe 1,000 different synapses in that level, and they're all interacting with each other. And so there's no way the system can be transparent. It can't even, I'm using air quotes, but literally it can't explain how it came to the conclusion. It can, if you put those inputs in, you're going to get that output, and it'll be reliable, but there's no way a human being can, as it were, follow the explanation. IBM ran into that problem with Watson. Remember Watson back in the day?
Of course.
Right.
Yes.
And so Watson, when that was state of the art, which was like 25 years ago, talk about a corporate missed opportunity. So Watson, remember it won Jeopardy, and everyone went, oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. So the next thing that IBM did was they programmed it they programmed Watson with all available medical knowledge in the world. Like all English-speaking, medical journals. In fact, it probably translated, foreign ones. Fed it all in, including a database of all existing scientific knowledge, and it could outdiagnose doctors. It's just the doctors didn't trust the diagnosis because they didn't understand how the Watson got to the answer, as it were. I'm using air quotes, and so there's the human mind, because of the constraints on our working memory. There's no way we could follow the interlinking. What is it? Human beings their working memory. You can 7 to 12 little items at any one point in your head. Well, these massive models are juggling millions of variables. So there's no way. So the transparency is, well, whenever you put those particular data points in, you're going to get the same answer out. But a human being wouldn't understand it. There's no way.
How can AI be applied to address what I would call societal challenges, climate change, healthcare, etc.?
Well, one of the beauties of AI is that it will consider things that human beings haven't considered before. So I'll use an example from chess. Prior to Google's DeepMind, the best chess program in the world was rated. I'm going to use the IQ points because people are more familiar with that. So Magnus Carlsen had a chess IQ of 180. Okay, and the best chess program, which had been trained on the best human games, had a chess IQ, let's just say, of 210, would crush Magnus Carlsen, crush him. But then that program had been trained on the best human games. What Google's DeepMind did was let's train it to play chess, but don't give it any input. Let's just give it the rules of the game. And so in 4 hours, this computer played itself millions of games without any existing knowledge of any other games, just had the rules. And in 4 hours later, it had leapfrogged all existing knowledge of the game. It had reconstructed all human beings knew in 4 hours. We've been playing the game of chess in its modern form for like a millennium, for 1,000 years. Well, DeepMind, AlphaZero chess leapfrogged that in 4 hours. So imagine letting loose these large models on scientific domains or medical domains. It's going to be extraordinary what they discover. By the way, AlphaZero chess, human beings aren't stupid. Like, we got most of it right. So in a game watching AlphaZero chess, like 95% of the time you go, wow, those are amazing moves, like world champion level. But then it'll start playing alien chess and you go, what's it doing? And then all of a sudden 3 moves later, checkmate. Wait, how did it do that? And so I am sure the discoveries in pharma, right, are going to be extraordinary. The drugs that they'll develop, things we'd never thought of before will come to. So I think biotech applications are extraordinary. I know this is way beyond my skill level, but new methods of mathematics will be developed. I mean, whole new ways of thinking about numbers. That human beings, we don't have the processing power. We have the intelligence. We just can't hold it all in our head at one time. So the advances in science and technologies, especially pharma, oh boy, that's going to be extraordinary. I don't know about things like, so climate change, I don't know. First, again, you got to define climate change, like what that is. But I'm sure it will develop ways to seed clouds, create, rain where we want it. But yeah, so we'll gain a lot of. I think the inroads with AI are going to be way more on say, medical development things.
It you said something a couple of minutes ago, then something popped in my head. That was a great analogy, by the way, which is why this popped in my head. Thinking of family offices and solving problems, kind of being creative. Do we take what people like Musk, going back to Elon and others, talk about as first principles? Do we take something, break it down, and look to build it up by understanding the components that make up, quote unquote, the collective or the solutions? Do we do that often enough? And are we capable of doing that more?
So you, once again, in your inimitable way, yes, this is a very profound concept. So
Thank you.
Heisenberg, I'm quoting Angelo and Heisenberg together. Heisenberg lamented, right? Heisenberg, for those of you, one of the titans of physics, right? At the age of 26, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, he's a grad student, right? And anyway, he lamented, he said, the best he could figure out is sometime around Galileo, physics took a wrong turn. And we'd have to go back there and rethink everything. And he said this is later in his life, he said he didn't have time to do it. But where you go back to basic principles, you really have to. I'm going to quote a very funny Vince Lombardi anecdote. So Vince Lombardi, for those of you who don't know, was one of the great legendary football coaches, and is very tough on his players. And they had just lost a game, and he was really pissed. And he goes, "Gentlemen, we're going to go back to basics." And he holds up a football. And he goes, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And one of his players, I forget which one, raised his hand. And he goes, "Coach, could you slow down a bit?" And when he backed up. So going back to basics, you're exactly right. Which is my point, that what Google's AlphaZero Chess did, they also did it for AlphaZero Go, is they didn't give it any human games. They just gave it the rules. There. Now, go forth and multiply and see what conclusions you can draw. Because a lot of the world that we built up is based on things that were, like Euclidean geometry, right? The parallel postulate, and it was, Euclid said, if there's a line and a point outside that line, there's only one parallel you can draw through that. It wasn't until the 1700s, no, 1800s. You had Gauss and that other guy who begins with an L, who came up with non-Euclidean geometry and said, well, what if we could have countless parallel lines going through that same point? And no one had ever thought that was possible. And then a whole new mathematics, non-Euclidean geometry, came out of that. By the way, another branch of non-Euclidean geometry was assume you couldn't draw any parallel lines through that point. And again, a whole new mathematics blossomed out of that simple little change. So AI is going to do that across the board in so many ways. It's going to go, well, what if that weren't true? And, human beings, because to actually explore a rabbit hole like that would take years or decades with maybe no payoff.
Yeah.
An AI program can do that in a couple hours, and it doesn't mind.
It doesn't get sick or complain or want more money.
It doesn't complain, and it's only a couple hours for that. Okay, here's what happens if we, dispense with that assumption. And our whole world is predicated on assumptions, and we talked about that earlier, right? That there's always going to be police around, or an electric grid, or if I need food, I know I can just go out and get it. Never a problem, right? I don't, it's not like I'm a prepper and I've got, canned goods and a shotgun. But there's the world that we have is predicated on so many things that we just take for granted. Heck, in the US, we take civility for granted, but clearly we can't anymore. So AI is what it's gonna uncover is gonna astonish the world. By the way, it occurs to me right now, talking about things popping into your head, that what distinguished Einstein from his peers at the time is Einstein was willing and able to entertain absurdities. So in Einstein in relativity, when something moves, it shrinks. And it's called the Lorentz contraction. Because a dude named Lorentz, forget his first name, calculated the contraction. And as you move close to the speed of light, it gets really small. I mean, really short. But everyone said, but of course that doesn't happen. And Einstein said, yeah, but what if it did? And so you need to be able to not just entertain so AI will come up with amazing things, and we need human beings to go, yeah, but that's ridiculous. Because that's what they did with the Lorentz contraction. They go, yeah, but clearly things don't get shorter. And clearly space doesn't bend, Albert. Yeah, I know, but what if it did? And so the AI will come up with the what ifs, and we need human beings to go, oh, let's take a look at this. Yeah.
Love it, Adam. Great stuff. A friend of mine sent me a text because he's listening. Mark, by the way, I'm going to get back at you. Angelo, you can never be popular. You're not good looking enough. Well, compared to Chris Williamson, a model who's a great podcaster, but I'm better looking, I think, than Tom Bilyeu, and he's got 5 million. Tom, by the way, I love your podcast. Would love to be on. Would love to have you on. So all in good fun, I think. Adam, we're going to take it to the home stretch. I promise we're there.
Oh,
I know. This is probably going to be your longest podcast with me. I think I can narrow it down to 5 or 7 questions to begin to wrap up. Right before I do that, taking advantage of among our largest live broadcast ever, I do have to, Angelo's second, since I'm the sponsor of the program. So one, I hope you're really enjoying Adam today. I love long form interviews. I love to make things not vanilla, not boring, but be incredibly active in the world of geopolitics, finance, and of course, everything with me really does circle back to family offices because that's my love and that's my passion. Follow me on both my YouTubes, Family Office TV and at Family Office. At Family Office, I actually do have a fair number of subscribers, but you got to come to Family Office TV as well. Obviously, LinkedIn. And the message I want to give you is if you're enjoying this and want to be a part of the private programs where nothing beats being in person, face to face, including we're going to have great people like Adam, but your fellow peers. And I did it last week in Palm Beach. It was incredible. If you want to be a part of what we're going to do in New York, May through November, then back to Palm Beach and hopefully some LA and Jackson Hole, and you see the value in something like this, you got to join. You got to be a founding member. If I don't believe in what I do, who is? So go to angelorobles.com, go to membership. There's only 30 spots to be a founding member. After today, we actually have about half left. And then you're going to be a founding member forever, get favorable pricing, have a say in our direction and what we do, and how we grow after our founding membership. You will get a multiple of value, not from digital masterclasses, content, and books, all valuable. And I love that intellectual stuff, but it's going to come face to face. It's going to come. That's where business is done. That's where problems get solved. And I'll make sure it's going to be worth your while. So again, go to angelorobles.com and go to membership and take me up on that opportunity to be a founding member in my private club, SFO Continuity private membership today. Okay. Adam, we are just about there. I'm actually going to clean up some of my Nvidia a little bit that I would have asked you in person. One of the questions that would probably get me banned from YouTube. So I'm not going to ask the question that would get me banned.
But wait a second. I want to interject really quickly. It just occurred to me when you were talking is that you should have, you know how websites will say the views of this, like op-ed, the views of this writer do not express those of the publisher. So you can say the same thing about me. you could say the views of this guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Angelo Robles or the Family Office group to which I belong.
They were going to get the Angelo disclaimer, which basically is kind of that. This podcast you're listening to at this moment, in a day, a week, a month, our opinions might change. I don't know about Nvidia, about AI, about Caitlin Clark, about Taylor Swift. I have no idea because new inputs are going to come into me. I'm a human being and my opinions could change. This is for entertainment and engaging purposes. At the end of the day, you know what? Think for yourself. When I asked Michael Saylor what the hell he learned at MIT, he said to think for myself. And that always stuck with me, and other billionaires have told me that as well. So again, I'm not going to be boring and vanilla. I'm not going to be what you want down the middle. I'm looking to change the dynamics of the community, no matter how much they try to ban me or shadow ban me or do this or do that. You're getting the full effect. And Adam kind of brings the best out of me. We're going to ask 2 questions about Nvidia, maybe 1.5. And then I'm going to ask you a question that you did not expect me to ask. Okay, we'll keep it a little straightforward. Is the heavy concentration of Nvidia's revenues from a small number of large customers a major risk factor that we don't talk about enough?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by talking about it enough. Every investor, again, I spoke earlier about calibrating around your conviction level, right? And so sophisticated investors calibrate their conviction level around just that risk, right? That's already embedded within all the other inputs into the calculus of I'm willing to pay this much for Nvidia, right? And so every investor, investment manager, whatever, that's what they're doing. They've presumably already taken that risk into account. And one of the problems in there's that thing of too big to fail. Well, you also run into you're too big and you have national security issues and things like that. So and you also have a Congress and a European Union that's only too happy to slap fines if you get a little too big and a little too successful. So there are those kinds of risks, I think. But yes, any corporation, not just Nvidia, if you have a few big clients, that there's some risk around that, of course.
Nvidia is allegedly investing in AI startups, then getting a significant portion of that investment money back as revenue from those startups purchasing Nvidia's GPUs and other products. Are there any potential issues with that?
So funny you should mention that. So I'm going to make a point about technology broadly here, but this is an important point. So one of the virtues of Silicon Valley has always been that it's been an ecosystem where if you wanted to start up in the tech space, Silicon Valley, you'd be hard pressed to do better because you'd have the legal teams and the financiers, the venture capitalists, right? You'd have the coders all there. So it was an ecosystem that attracted brilliance and genius there. And now the problem is that the venture capitalists, let's say I'm Sequoia or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, and I've invested in company X. I'll want all my other portfolio companies, to the extent that they can, buy from company X, right? If for example, I've started company X is the delivery company, then all my other companies that I own a piece of, I'm going to say, you know what, if you have anything delivered, use company X. Now, that when it works well, that's fine. But what's happened and I'm about to make a big point in another 30 seconds, I had to lay the foundations for it, is all those companies become interlinked. and interdependent. So when one of them has problems, it can bring them all down. So the Silicon Valley Bank bust, was it March 8th of last year?
Mm-hmm.
That was right on the heels of the shoot, what's that kid's name? Went to prison. Come on, help me here. Who's that?
Well, like Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I was just blanking on him. No pun intended. So the problems of Silicon Valley Bank were linked to the problems regarding that. And that was linked earlier to the collapse in a lot of the crypto coins, including, was it Terra or one of those?
That was a complete fraud. Yeah, Terra Luna, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. Right. And
you do know a thing or two about crypto after all.
So a thing or two or three, but not as well as you do by any means. But anyway, so all of these interlinked companies wind up going down. They've all, imagine walking along the Swiss Alps along a really narrow path, and there's a big ravine there, and you've tied them all together. When one of them goes over, they're all going over. So the Silicon Valley ecosystem of tech companies has set up there's a big risk there, actually, because all of these companies are interlocked. And when one of them starts to, and notice that these things become correlated, because if one company does bad and it starts to have to sell assets or something, those assets go down, then other companies going, oh man, they start to sell. So these risks that weren't present, so the Silicon Valley ecosystem has created risks, and Nvidia's got to be careful about that, right? About seeding companies. So you think you're diversifying. Oh no, you're making them more dependent on you. So if you start having trouble, they're going to have trouble. And if they have trouble, you're going to have trouble. That's not a hedge. That's not diversification. And so here, I'm going to give the CEO of Nvidia a tip right now, Angela. And so the tip is from 1936. And in 1936, DuPont's chief chemist was Wallace Carothers, brilliant Canadian chemist. And he basically made DuPont back then, right? This tortured genius. Anyway, he comes running into the chairman's office, Lamont DuPont II, and said, look what I discovered. And it was some really long name, and they decided to rename it polyester. Oh my God, we're gonna make a fortune on this. And he immediately sets up another division to put that out of business. Think about that. Not to exploit, he was going to exploit how we're going to sell the heck out of this, right? But he knew that all his competitors would be looking to create something better. So within DuPont, he sets up another division, keeps them separate. They don't know about each other, but you guys put it out of business because I want to own the replacement. That's what Nvidia should do, right? You want to invest in, create something that's going to make our chips obsolete, because all your competitors are doing that. And if you're the head of Nvidia, and I don't even own a share, that's really good advice from Lamont DuPont II, back in the day, almost 100 years ago, right? You don't, you said, again, he should be thinking, what are my competitors going to do? I want to own that space also. They're all looking to make products and things that don't depend on Nvidia. Great. Nvidia should do that as well. Right? We're making, gobs of money. Let's set up an internal division of Skunk Works. Maybe they're already doing it. I have no idea. They were smart.
I was actually going to say that. How do you know they're not? So, of course, that's a possibility. Really good stuff. And yeah, that other question in Nvidia, well, you could go and find my interview earlier today that will be up with Ram Alawalia. I actually do ask that. Or simply, again, this is the in-person stuff. That's the insider's game. You got to join. Will the conflict in Israel give the Fed the cover they need to cut rates?
Well, think about it. We've got a near full employment economy. Now, I have big quibbles with the definition of full employment, right? Let's leave that aside. But we got, by all measures, a robust economy. The stock market is near all-time highs still. And we have inflation. Inflation expectations they're near 12, 15-year highs as we speak. They're almost as high as they were right after Putin invaded Ukraine. So the inflation expectations right now today are almost as high as they were when everyone thought, oh my gosh, oil's going to go to 200 and wheat is going to, go to $20 a bushel. So there's no way the Fed can cut. Now, the Fed can be stupid, but how can you cut rates when inflation is surging, inflation expectations, which is more important, it's what people expect, they're near like 15-year highs, which means interest rates, the 10-year should be around 15-year highs also. And so the Fed can cut rates on the short end of the curve, right? The overnight rate. Good. That's not going to change the 10-year. In fact, what it might do is drive up 10-year yields. There, that's a prediction. They cut the short end of the curve. 10-year yield is going to go through the roof.
Wow. Yeah.
Listen, I said that in the opposite though. In mid-December 2015, Janet Yellen. It was the exact mirror opposite. Janet Yellen, December 2015, was saying, in early December, she was saying, I'm probably going to raise interest rates at the next FOMC, which was mid-December. And I told my clients that would be idiotic because inflation expectations were plunging to multi-year lows. And she decided to raise interest rates. And I told my clients, if she does, they're going to plunge to new all-time lows. That's exactly what they did. 7 months later, 10-year yields went from like 2.2% to 1.37 in July of 2016. This would be the mirror opposite. You watch. This is for entertainment purposes only, right? I'm not giving you right?
Exactly.
If Powell cuts rates, investors are going to go, more inflation. They're going to start dumping bonds. 10-year yields are going to go through the roof. It's going to do the opposite of stimulating things.
Speaking of entertainment purposes only, Adam, like we have so much in common. Of course, we're incredibly dapper, intelligent, and uber handsome. The world is starting to realize.
Goes without saying.
But Adam, we have something else that I did not know until we started the podcast. You are wearing a short sleeve shirt. I did not know that you have tattoos. Now, here's a question that is meant to be a little funny, comical, and a little bit serious. I think now my family office mentors are going to cringe because they always do when I say this. I have tattoos. And I was told by multiple people, usually a little bit older than me, Angelo, that's not becoming of an intellectual in the family office world. Yeah, it's that probably took, like, what did it take away from my IQ? Well, actually, one of my tattoos probably did, but I made it up and then some. So, I mean, I know it's a little personal. It's your choice, like it was mine. I believe it's a free country. We do what we want. I'm a libertarian. It's all good. But the fact that some people, if I were to walk into an office as a 22, 23-year-old and I had a beard and I had tattoos, they would not even pay attention if my IQ was 160, if I could rein business, Now, hedge funds wouldn't give a shit. They just want to make money. But traditional classic corporate America, why is there still a stigma and why does that matter? It's all about results, or is it?
Well, so I'm going to answer the question in multiple ways. First, and I know we're going to wrap this up. And if anyone has any questions, they can always approach you, or you can.
I'll have 3 quick final questions, I promise.
So
that's it. That's it. No more after that.
So around this, I also have a top hat, and I have some jewelry, and I don't see, the thing is, I don't have any intellectual pretensions. So I don't care what they think about anything. And because I get paid for performance, right? So I don't.
Yes, results.
Yeah. So measurable results in the world. And so that's all they care about, really. And you know what? You remind me of that great quip with Lincoln and Grant during the Civil War. And people were complaining about Grant was getting drunk a lot. And Lincoln said, well, I'm going to find out what he's drinking, and I'm going to send a case to all my other friends.
It's a results-oriented business, of course.
So likewise, maybe they'll emulate us sartorially instead of if you. Yeah. Here's the thing: anybody, if that's going to be what they're judging on, I'm not interested in them anyway.
That's what I say. Now, you're making my life very hard, Adam, because I did say 3 final questions. I'm looking at 12. Here we go. Why has cocoa had such a massive run in 2024? Will it continue?
Okay. One of my favorite traders ever of all time was a little known guy named Richard Dennis. Now, unless you were in the 70s, so Richard Dennis, I think he was at the University of Chicago, and he delivered pizza. And he ran up pizza delivery money into a $300 million fortune on the Chicago Board of Trade. Think about that. And he wasn't playing other people's money. That was all his money. Pizza delivery money to $300 million in like 5 years. And because he was a philosophy major, he said, and I'm tying this to cocoa. He said, people think that markets respond to news. He said, in fact, news responds to markets. And so the Wall Street Journal reporter said, well, what do you mean? He said, look, I'll give you an example. And my recollection of it was cocoa. He said, the price of cocoa has been going up very sharply last couple of days. He told the reporter, there will be news stories, probably a fire somewhere in one of the countries that exports cocoa. And sure enough, that's exactly what occurred. In other words, the news arose to explain why cocoa was going up, not the other way around. And like cocoa didn't know there was going to be a fire. The news arose because of, well, why is cocoa going up? So I'll tell you why cocoa is going up, because nobody thought it would, right? They're recalibrating. Oh my gosh. Otherwise things would have been hedged against, I don't know, against fires or whatever. But those kind of spikes, what you want to do is go back to the 70s and take a look at, the commodity markets back then. Or oil in 2008, right? Oil shot up to nearly 150, West Texas Intermediate. And then it was down to like 40 a few months later. That's a big drop. And so these big run-ups almost always there's a collapse afterwards. Like, in fact, I'm going to say always.
I'm going to squeeze cheating a little bit, 2 questions into one. What is the best type of portfolio? It did make my title after all. What is the best type of portfolio in the event of World War III? And effectively, is counterparty risk heightened, obviously, during a World War III event.
Yeah, so those of you who don't know, counterparty risk is if I make a bet that something's going to go up, someone else is on the other side of the trade betting the opposite. And if the person on the other side of the trade is influential enough, or has too much risk exposure, they're not going to be able to pay me off. So there's that kind of risk. Back in the early 1980s, late 70s, it was the Hunt brothers. Do you remember them? Talk about Texas oil. So in the late 70s, early
Kansas City Chiefs, of course.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, the family still owns the Kansas City Chiefs, NFL Super Bowl champion.
Well, the Hunt brothers, they had a lot of oil money, but gold was going through the roof, and they decided we're going to corner the silver market.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to corner the silver market. And they did, but they weren't students of history, because that's been attempted a couple other times to corner a market. And their problem was that the counterparty risk, the people on the losing side of the trade, owned the COMEX. So they changed the margin requirements. The Hunt brothers forced liquidation, and they lost billions of dollars. And so counterparty risk is very real. So in the event of a war, remember, all bets are kind of off then.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, it's not a question of keeping a portfolio together. Right? Wow. And so, that's why Buffett and Munger, I'm just going to refer to him in the present tense, such brilliant philosophers of the world. And we're going to invest in businesses where things that people actually need. So you go through, what are people going to need if that happens? And I hope, I don't rely on hope, because what's the point? You can do something about it or not. But I hope those in power don't start a war any more than it already is. And this is tragic enough at this level. But that because no good. War ultimately is a failure of imagination. Okay, we can work this out in some other way, but it's only losers in war. And even the peace that follows a war is just a setup for the next war. Because the peace, look at the peace after World War I. Oh, good luck. So, and AI is not going to help us with this. The problem is human beings over the centuries have gotten really better at doing things, like building bombs or technology. But our wisdom flatlined, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, no, for sure. Flatlined. And so we're no wiser. In fact, we think we are, which makes us dumber. It's a really dangerous cocktail. So, in terms of war, what would you do? At that point, so many things break down. At that point, it's just keep your loved ones alive. It's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, that takes context. Do you mean Civil War, hot war, Cold War, nuclear? So again, that's context is really needed in terms of answering the question. And the reality is we don't really know. I guess my last question, which by the way, in 1.5 more minutes, will put us at 3 hours, my longest podcast ever. And it would be,
oh my God.
Would be an honor for me, Adam, if you could state, damn, Angelo, 3 hours and 2 minutes. That's the longest podcast I've ever done. I want to beat Tim's long podcast.
Well, but I was with Shane Parrish, and we were, I think, 4.5 hours.
Okay, I'm number 2. How about that?
Well, wait, he had split it into 2.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to
wait, Angelo, we could easily go for another few hours. I mean, if that's,
I know, but I'm hungry.
Yeah.
But I do have, speaking of being hungry, kind of an important last question because it also made my title. So I have to ask it. Will GLP-1 become a winner takes most market? Will Lilly and Novo continue to quote unquote dominate? Or can companies like Viking, VKTX, disrupt them?
So there's been a lot of, I mentioned, I don't know, about 15, 20 minutes ago, that last question about AI and pharma. So peptides are very, very interesting.
Love them. Yep, indeed.
They're really amazing. For those of you who don't know, there's lots of, so peptides are basically cocktail amino acid chains that for example, they have peptides that'll help you grow hair or lose weight.
I need the one about growing hair. Come on, Adam. Where's that one? Am I allowed to get it in the US?
So there is one. But anyway, so let me finish. So
that alone was worth the 3 hours to me.
Wait, I want to get the point out. So the peptides, they're peptides that'll help you relax, go to sleep, gain weight, lose weight, gain muscle. And they're targeted for very specific purposes. So they have peptides, for example, that help heal muscle tissue damage.
Called the Wolverine peptide, BP1557. And now
there's also beta. Is it beta alpha? Beta alpha, and there's beta thymosin. One of those two is also like that. And so muscle damage, you'd think, oh, well, that's for Wolverine to build muscle and pump up. But there are other kinds of muscles, like your heart muscle, that these peptides might be able to help. I'm not giving medical advice, but
I was just going to say that.
I would look into peptides. I think it's really, and it's just amino acids, they're proteins.
Of course.
They're remarkably effective, and I can see that they're going to be outlawed because you can't get a patent on them.
You nailed it, Adam.
Yeah,
there are some things we have to go outside the U.S.
Yeah, I could see. Right, that's what would happen. Right, we'd go. There's medical tourism. We'd wind up going to Mexico to get the peptides or whatever.
Oh, Tijuana, right across from San Diego. Some pretty incredible facilities.
Yeah.
And again, Adam hinted at it. This is not medical advice. This is not investment advice. This is engaging, entertaining. Our opinions could change the next moment. Conditions change, everything change. Do your own diligence. And again, think for yourself. Wow, over 3 hours. It's been a pleasure to have Adam Robinson on. Adam, for those that would like to follow you on X, is it I am Adam Robinson?
Correct.
I got it right. I didn't say I am Robinson. So I am Adam Robinson. And for those, and I hope my people don't bombard you, who knows, for those that are legitimately a family office, because honestly, Adam charges not insignificant retainer fees. You're potentially available as a private advisor or a consultant. Would you prefer they potentially reach out to me to make an intro? Should they DM you on X? Is there another way to connect with you?
Sure, reach out maybe through you.
Okay. And again, please have it be a serious inquiry. Adam is very, very busy. He gives away a lot of free stuff on his platforms, including X. He's active on the podcast network. And as you could tell from my 3 hours today, he's very open. Rather honestly, including for me, you're getting a lot of really, really, really good free stuff. On that note, Adam, and I know you really want to run, but I do have to give a.
I don't want to run. Okay. I'm just getting started.
I gotta have my greens and grass-fed beef, and I do have a sweet tooth, a little bit of apple pie, if you all don't mind. So that is coming up. First of all, thank you all for our live participants. Thank you all that would watch or listen to this in the future, even a time capsule 10 years from now. Of course, thank you to Adam Robinson. It's always great to have him back. He's always generous with his time and puts up with my crazy, and sometimes you could argue it's debatable, little shitty questions. But nonetheless, I enjoy asking them because I want to learn. I'm inherently, quote unquote, curious. I also want to know why my chess game has regressed since I was in my early 20s, but we're going to save that question on effectively brain power, brain atrophy, and all that for a future visit from, quote unquote, Adam Robinson. I'm sorry, Adam, please.
I wanted to throw out a joke.
Okay.
since you kept talking about questions, okay?
Mhm.
So, guy's got a big legal problem, goes to a fancy lawyer and says, what are your rates? The guy says, $500 for 3 questions. He goes, well, that's very expensive, isn't it? And the lawyer says, yes, it is. What is your 3rd question?
I'm going to have to start to use that one in my consulting practice. So, we'll see how well that's going to fly. So, everyone, I love this. I do this because I'm curious. I'm passionate. I don't have a monetizable, in the true sense of the word, podcast. I don't have enough followers. I think my stuff is pretty good, but I need some of the world to kind of quote unquote catch on. So I do this because I love it. I do this because I learn. I'm going to listen to this. I'm going to walk away with 1, 2, or 10 different things. I put it in my notes. I utilize it in my consulting with families and the work that I do, and in implementing some of my quote unquote own strategies. But even then, I make my own decisions and I think for myself. So I think that's very, very important. Again, I love what I've done in the past. Family Office Association was great. Been there, done that, sold that. It's over. I hope they do incredible. I love what I do on Family Office TV. Follow me on my YouTubes and LinkedIn. And yes, like I said, my business passion, along with my masterclasses, consulting, and education, really is building into the 30 quote unquote founding members. Go to angelorobles.com, go to membership, see if it's a good fit for you. Reach out to me if you desire, join and be a part of it. I really look forward to your consideration. I appreciate all of you. Thank you all so much. Tell your friends, subscribe, don't just watch. That's also how I could grow. I got to be a little bit more like the other real quote unquote podcasters. That's what they do. Click the subscribe button now. So I'm going to start to say that as well. I hope you all enjoyed it. Look forward to the next time. I'm back. I'm busy. Events, everything good going on. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Adam.
Bye all.
My pleasure.